Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We are listening to the Greenburg 6.
Wasn't a place where this kind of stuff happens.
What can you do?
Right?
That is serious. That was the truth.
A crime of this magnitude was huge.
The manner of death is no doubt homicide.
This is the most horrific that I've ever seen done to a human over that period of time.
Who could do this to her?
She wanted friendship, companionship, but most of all she wanted was to be accepted.
Talk about the worst lottery in the world.
Greensburg is the county seat in Westmoreland County. It is a beautiful section of western Pennsylvania, about an hour east of Pittsburgh. It's really known as a place with a lot of beautiful farmland, rolling hills.
Jennifer and I were originally from a small, tiny village called Luxor, Pennsylvania, but it's close to Greensburg, Pennsylvania. We were close, my sisters and I, growing up together.
Jen Doherty was a wonderful, happy 30-year-old woman. She lived with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
I didn't realize at first that Jennifer was different, not until grade school. I realized then because other kids treated her differently, adults treated her differently. I was always extra protective of Jennifer because she didn't realize that there were problems or that somebody did not like her. I was worried about Jennifer leaving school and going into the real world because she was now considered an adult, even though she was not intellectually an adult. Around 2009, Jennifer had joined a place called West Place, which was a clubhouse that offered therapy and social opportunities for people like herself, and that was where she had met Peggy. They would hang out and do things at West Place. They would also walk around Greensburg. There were concerts in the park that they would attend together and just walk. She liked walking. She was a walker, so she was content to have a friend to do that with. Jennifer had gone to Greensburg that Monday morning because she had doctor's appointments and she was going to spend time with her friend Peggy. And she was going to be spending the night with Peggy at Peggy's apartment. She had left Peggy's phone number in case mom needed to reach her. And she went to the bus to take the bus to Greensburg. I realized while I was at work that my sister had not called me, and that was out of the ordinary. I called her cell phone number, and the voicemail was not Jennifer's voice. It was a different voicemail. And my first thought was my mom did not pay that bill, and they probably reassigned her number to somebody else. So I called my mom, and my mom was home, and I said, Mom, Jennifer's phone keeps going to voicemail, and it's not her voice. And she said, I know. I heard that this morning too. And so we both thought it was weird. And my first thought was after that, somebody stole her phone. And she is stuck in Greensburg without a cell phone. And she has no way to contact us. And I don't know if she knows our phone numbers. I figure, okay, I'm probably going to have to go to Greensburg to find her.
February 11th was a very busy day for us here at Channel 4. We were covering Snowmageddon. Western Pennsylvania was hit hard.
February 11th, that would have been the daylight detective. Guy by the name of Dan Grant, he had his work truck, his service truck was parked at the middle school. And he walked out and saw a garbage can, which would have been underneath his truck, between the front and back wheels. He thought the wind blew it there, and he reached under to just pull it out so he wouldn't run it over. And he realized that there was weight to it, and the lid had popped off. So he felt the body inside.
That's our breaking news. A body found stuffed in a garbage can at a local middle school parking lot. Now, police here in Greensburg
snowing and there's a heavy amount of snow, I decided that we were going to transport the entire trash can with the body in it to autopsy because we didn't want to risk losing any evidence. At that point, we had no idea, male, female, adult, child. When we removed the body from the can, we were able to identify that it was a young female, but we still, at this point, did not know who it was. There was no identification on her at that time.
We had a command post at the middle school that consisted of the city police, the state police, county detectives. We followed leads. They wanted to go door to door. What you would do when you didn't know where to start.
We need the public's help to determine who the victim is and how we may notify family. We have received some calls regarding what neighbors were passing by believe was suspicious activity. So we're following down those leads.
My mom called me back and she said, I don't know if I should even tell you this, but they had found a girl in Greensburg in a garbage can. They're talking and saying that this is like a young girl, like they're thinking it's a child. And I said, Mom, don't even worry about that. That's not even our problem. The more I thought about it, the more things started making weird sense. And I thought, this is just crazy. And at that point, that's when I call the state police. And the state police send me to the Greensburg station. It escalated really quickly. And I thought, this is not good.
At the time that we were collecting evidence and identifying that it was a young female, I'd taken some photos and sent them back to the City of Greensburg Police Department, where detectives were actively working on trying to find out who this was.
Adam, after the shoes removed from the garbage can, forwarded me a picture, and this is before iPhones, and I had just a flip phone.
There's this little tiny picture on this little phone, and we're trying to look at it, and I said, I can't see, I can't tell, like, is it?
It was just a postage size picture of her face, and her hair had been all cut off almost to like a crew cut.
I said, this girl just doesn't have hair. Her face was so swollen, and it was black and blue, and it was bloody, and whenever they sent the picture, they weren't able to crop it out, but you could see a cut across her neck. And I thought, this just isn't her, because this isn't what she looks like.
Cheers, back to our breaking news. A body found stuffed in a garbage can in a local middle school parking lot.
I call the state police, and the state police send me to the Greensburg station. We were able to positively identify her with distinguishing body marks. At that point, that's when we knew it was her. Talk about the worst lottery in the world. And that's exactly what it was. I couldn't understand how just a few days ago she was Jennifer, and then at that moment she was the picture that they showed us. It was so unbelievable. Who could do this to her? That night we went home and was just trying to make sense of everything. I tried to go to bed and I couldn't because every time my husband would shut off the lights, I was terrified of the dark. So we actually had to sleep with the lights on that night.
I started to feel a real affinity in this case because at this time I had a 2-year-old daughter at home that was special needs. Some of what I started to hear about Jennifer being trusting and caring and loving was exactly what I saw when I went home and looked into the eyes of my own daughter. When I saw that in the pictures of Jen, and certainly in talking with Joy and the other family members, I knew that this was a very important case to me.
On February 11th, later that morning, we found the home for the garbage can out of the snowbank. but it was missing. There was no snow in these garbage bags. They were obviously removed from a garbage can. So the plan was we were going to take the garbage to identify whose it was to see where the garbage can came from. While we were waiting for a car to come to take that garbage, Ricky Smyrns and Angela Marinucci came walking towards the house, 428 North Fenn, where he was living. I had dealt with Ricky a number of times through my career, and we knew each other. And he said, "Hey, Detective Burnell, what's up?" And I said, "We were looking for Jennifer Dawkins. She's missing." And at the time, we knew she was killed. But I just wasn't giving him that information. And he said he knew her. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll approach this differently. That's how you know her. She stayed here Monday night. And I haven't seen her since. We did the search warrant at that house.
When I first entered the apartment, I did a quick overview, a quick walkthrough with another detective just to see what the layout was and to plan my attack of how I'm going to process. But I immediately saw evidence in the residence that I deemed valuable for this investigation. I could see some remnants of blood. I noted a lot of sharp instruments around. There was an empty box of garbage bags sitting there. There was blood on that box. In the attic, we ended up finding a box that had most of Jennifer's belongings in it. The murder weapon was up there, other bloody clothing.
I asked Britt and Angela to come to City Hall, and they agreed to. So what did you do?
I just arrested Rick. Come on. I swear. That was the truth. I did.
You knew full well what you were doing and what was in that garbage can, right?
But I was also scared. My team that I was in it.
One of the facts we uncovered during our interviews was that before it was public knowledge that Jen had been murdered, or that we had contacted Ricky Smyrns, he ran into a girl who had just got off a bus. He stopped her and admitted that he killed someone.
I think it was about 1:30 in the morning. I got a call from Amy, the district attorney's office, and Amy said, "I have information. I need you to wake up and I need you to listen." She said, "We've made arrests and I want you to know who we've arrested." And I said, "Okay." She said, "You need paper. You need to sit down and you need to get a pen and paper." And I did. She gave me a name and she said, "And this is the date of birth. You need to write all of this down." So I wrote down a name and a date of birth. And then she gave me another name and a date of birth. And then another name and a date of birth. And I said, "Amy, what are you doing? Like, how many names are you giving me?" And she said, "There are more." Finally, I wrote down the last name and the date of birth, and she said, "We arrested all of these people." She said, "They are all responsible for Jennifer's death." The last piece of information that we had about Jennifer and where she was that she was with Peggy because of that envelope she had left for my mom with Peggy's phone number. On February 11th, later that day, we were able to call Peggy. Finally, she did answer the phone. She had actually told me on the phone first that Jennifer had left. Jennifer wasn't with her anymore, and I think that was the moment that we knew she knew more than she was telling. Around 2009, Jennifer had joined a place called West Place, which was a clubhouse that offered therapy and social opportunities for people like herself, and that was where she had met Angela and Peggy. Jen was also friends with Ricky through Angela and Peggy as well. There was a relationship between Jen and Ricky, but there's also relationships between Ricky and Angela. But Jennifer was definitely talking with him and had some sort of relationship with him.
She was smitten with Ricky. Angela was jealous. And that's where it all started.
In the early evening on February 9th, Jen went back to Peggy's apartment, but Peggy wasn't alone. There were 5 other people there. Angela Marinucci, Amber Meininger, Melvin Knight, Ricky Smyrns, and Robert Masters. Those people were later known as the Greenburg Six.
They all treated 428 North Penn as like home base. Melvin didn't have anywhere to stay. I think they invited him and Amber to stay with them. And Angela would have been a senior in high school and was our first term. And Robert Masters came from the Michigan area to Greensburg, meeting Peggy Miller over the internet.
Jennifer had no idea that this was going to turn into a bad situation.
Didn't start out by wanting to hurt her. It started by, like, that was their words, to humiliate her. They called them family meetings about what to do. They all participated in decisions that were going to be made about her. They cut her hair, they poured nail polish on her, and then they started hitting her in the head with a plastic pop bottle. And then it escalated from there.
Jennifer constantly said, "Why are you doing this?" begging them to stop.
We never determined the specific order that the events took place, but we did know that they became more and more horrific, from cutting her hair to forcing her to drink bleach. It just escalated out of control, sort of like in a mob mentality. The police were called to the apartment by a former tenant to retrieve some belongings. Tuesday night, they hid her in the attic, so something was going on. Obviously, they didn't want the police to know.
The police had come in and were searching the apartment, and they were able to move Jennifer between rooms and put her in the attic and told her she made any noise, they would kill her. So she didn't make any noise when the police were there. Literally, she was feet away from, salvation, and they were able to control her because she trusted that they were going to let her go.
After Jennifer endured what amounted to be a day and a half of this physical abuse and torture, the Greenburg Six got together for a family meeting, and they decided that Jennifer Doherty would die.
They knew that if they turned her loose, that she would report it to the police. They decided that Ricky and Melvin Knight would actually kill her. And they took her into the bathroom and stabbed her.
During the course of the autopsy, numerous injuries were uncovered, not only injuries to Jennifer, but defense wounds from the fight that must have occurred during this torture and murder. There were numerous injuries all over her body that indicated it had been a long process before she had died, that she had fought for a long time.
This is the most the most horrific that I've ever seen done to, like, a human over that period of time. There was kidnapping element to it. There was the torture element to it. I've dealt with homicides, domestics where you can't take a bullet back, but what they did, they could have stopped over and over and over again. They just didn't.
The idea that 6 people could find each other and agree to this just astonishes me. Like, I can't get 6 people to commit to one place to eat on a Friday night. I can't imagine 6 people just making the decision, okay, we're going to kill someone.
It was so high profile because it was not only a homicide, but of a person that was taken advantage of by people that she considered to be friends.
6 people charged in connection with the torture and the murder of a woman in Westmoreland County are set to have their preliminary hearing today. We covered this story extensively for several years. There was just outrage from the community, people wanting justice for Jennifer.
It was terrifying walking into the court that first day. It was overwhelming because we were still just in such shock that it even happened.
When we went to trial on the first case, I felt very confident that we had done everything that we could to collect evidence and the proper items in the crime laboratory.
During the testimony at both Melvin Knight's trial and Ricky Smart's trial, the motive was shown to be a love triangle between Ricky Smart's, Angela Marinucci, and Jennifer. There was a jealousy that Angela Marinucci held for Jennifer Doherty.
Jennifer Doherty's family says they are thankful they won't have to return to this courthouse anytime soon. However, forgiveness may never come. Peggy Miller will spend 35 to 74 years in prison. Robert Masters will spend 30 to 70 years for pleading to the same charges. Melvin Knight and Ricky Smyrns were previously sentenced to death. Angela Marinucci was sentenced to life in prison, and Amber Meitinger received 40 to 80 years.
I think justice was served as best as it could have been. I don't think there will truly be justice in this world. I guess that'll have to be left up to God.
There are people out there that take advantage of people that can't help themselves. And that's what we're going out there to try and prevent.
Greensburg was a town that we grew up in. Like, we grew up over the hill from there. And it just wasn't a place where this kind of stuff happens. And I think it just made it feel very unbelievable and just so unreal.
Hundreds of people, many Jennifer Doherty never even knew, showed up tonight to honor her memory. All of the friends her sister said she would have loved to have known.
Jennifer wanted very little out of life. She wanted friendship, companionship, but most of all she wanted was to be accepted.
She wanted to fall in love. Like, she wanted to get married and have kids. And I wasn't sure if any of those things would happen for her. I hoped that they would. And, probably one of the more upsetting things was the fact that she never got to that point. She wasn't allowed to.
Being in the military, in law enforcement, I've seen a lot of people die. I've seen a lot of really bad things. But you never think anything's going to happen to you. Not that you're above it. It always happens to somebody else. Nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened. The deputy showed up at my door. All he said was, "You need to call your dad." My dad started crying, and he told me that there had been a fire at my mom's house. The only people living in the house was my mom, Becky, her boyfriend, John, and my little sister, Becky.
We're still waiting for positive identification of 3 bodies found in a burned-out home at Pinyon Pines.
We knew right away that everyone was dead. Maybe my mom fell asleep with a cigarette or a gas leak. But what happened was much, much worse. I learned that Becky was found in a wheelbarrow. Apparently she had been placed in this and set on fire. My baby sister was gone.
This was the further house, and the wheelbarrow was found here. We know that it was brought to this spot because there were tracks rolled out that way. Why bring her body towards the front of the house? We think it was the poser, and they wanted to leave some kind of symbol, make it as personal as possible.
That's hate. She was obviously the target. When I heard the wheelbarrow situation, that's when I knew it was because he had threatened to kill her.
A lot of the evidence pointed toward Robert Payne and Christian Smith. Robert Payne was Becky's ex-boyfriend. Christian Smith was Robert Payne's best friend.
saved lives in Afghanistan. He doesn't take lives. There's no way. It's all very obvious. There's no way.
Robert Aiken and Kristen Smith are accused of 3 counts of murder. Let's look at all the evidence. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. This is not the case that should be brought against these 2 men.
There is not a doubt in my mind that they have the right people. I know that they do.
It was a vicious triple homicide, but there were almost no clues left behind. That's because a fire consumed the crime scene, destroying vital evidence. With the investigation hampered from the start, it would take nearly 12 long years to bring this case to trial and to its emotional conclusion. Troy Roberts brings us The Murder in Pinyon Pines.
This foundation is all that remains of the Freakley home in Pinyon Pines, California. On the evening of September 17, 2006, Tanya Freakley's childhood home was burned to the ground.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened. It's them every day.
Inside the home, investigators have found the bodies of Tanya's 53-year-old mother, Vicki Freakley, and her 55-year-old boyfriend, John Hayward. It was later determined they had both been shot.
The homicide unit is treating this as a homicide.
Outside in a burning wheelbarrow were the charred remains of Tanya's 18-year-old sister, Becky, her body too badly burned to determine the cause of death.
The worst part is that's my baby sister. I was supposed to be the one to protect her and be there for her. That's my job.
Tanya, then a deputy sheriff in another town, relayed the devastating news to her sister Drew, an Air Force medic stationed in Japan at the time.
I think it's just mortifying when you find out that somebody could be that horrible and sinister, like something you'd see in a horror flick as opposed to real life.
For Drew and Tanya, it's hard to reconcile that horrific murder scene to their storybook upbringing on the property. Their father, Ron Freakley, had built their home himself in the mountains high above the desert heat of the Coachella Valley.
It was just a nice place. It was country. It was definitely out of the city, and I liked it. It was a good Vicky.
My mom was just a very kind-hearted, wonderful woman. She loved being a mom. She loved gardening. She loved sewing and quilting and cook. You know, that was really important for her to teach us how to cook, even from a very, very young age.
The youngest of the sisters was high-spirited Becky Freakley.
Becky was always just an amazing person, even when she was small. Always had a smile on her face. She was always there for you.
She's smart. Becky used to actually help Tanya and Drew with their homework. And you know, she's 4 years younger than them. She got along with everybody. She did. She was just a fun, happy person.
But the happy times of the family didn't last. Ron and Vicky divorced after 13 years of marriage.
She was a good person, but we sort of grew apart.
As the years passed, Tanya and Drew also left home. Becky remained behind with her mother, who eventually found love again with contractor John Hayward.
My dad called Vicky his cupcake because she was just so sweet.
Kitty Hayward is John's daughter.
They were drawn together because they both loved the outdoors, and they loved living up there together. I would be like, Dad, why are you guys living up here? Just come down to the city. There's woods up here. And he would always say, like, it's free up here. No one will ever bother us, and this is the safest place that you can.
Then came that night in September. At first, no one could imagine who would want to hurt John, Becky, Vicky.
I really had no idea. The finger was being pointed at everyone, I think. There were all kinds of rumors.
Rumors started circulating that perhaps they had been murdered by someone with a grudge against Ron Figley. Ron had retired the year before from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Did you believe that this may have been some sort of retribution for your work in law enforcement?
No, I really didn't. I never really was involved in anything where somebody would have said, I want to get back at this guy. I didn't have that kind of career.
So you had no enemies?
Not really, no.
Investigators looked into that theory and quickly ruled it out, but then rumors began swirling about Ron Figley himself.
I mean, it's just natural to think that possibly the husband or family could have been involved, and I understood that going into it.
Were you interviewed?
Yes, I was. I was crying probably through most of it.
Investigators asked Ron to take a polygraph test.
That was probably the first time that I really felt like I was kind of a suspect. So I got up there, I took the polygraph, and the lady came out. She said, this is one of the
phone records put Ron 11 hours away at his property in Northern California when the crime took place, and police ruled him out as a suspect. But there was one person, a friend of Becky's, who says she knew immediately who was responsible.
This was intentional, and he did it, and I've known since day one he did it.
In the first days after the murders, Ron Figley was besieged with questions.
None of us really knew why it occurred or had a reason for it. The last thing I thought was that it was something to do with Becky.
But once the initial shock had subsided, Ron began looking at the crime through his investigator's eyes and came to believe that it was Becky who had been targeted. It seemed too personal because of the fear Becky had.
She was really, really afraid of fire. When she was younger, her mom was fixing tacos, and she had a pan full of hot grease. Becky pulled it down off the stove, and it burned on her chest.
She had third-degree burns on her chest. So someone that's with someone intimately would know that she had these scars and was scared of fire.
Becky's friend, Jeannie McDaniel, was suspicious about someone right away. So immediately when you heard the murders, your mind went to Robert Page?
Immediately. Nothing else in my mind. There's nobody else that could have done this.
Robert Pate was Becky Figley's ex-boyfriend.
Robert got Becky a croissant.
The teenagers started dating in high school and were together for over a year.
Looks like you guys are getting married.
At first, Becky and Robert seemed happy.
I think it was her first love.
Dun, 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 dun.
I just think she was madly in love with him.
Aww.
But Jeannie says Robert soon grew possessive of Becky.
When her and I went on vacation about 10 months before she died, he called about 20, 30 times in a night, just harassing her, wanting to talk to her while we were hanging out with friends.
20 to 30 times in one night?
Minutes within each other.
In January 2006, Becky and Robert broke up and started seeing other people, but according to Jeannie, Robert's obsessive behavior only grew worse and took an even darker turn shortly before the murders in September.
She came to my house 3 weeks before she died and said he had even threatened to kill me. Those were her exact words. He even threatened to kill me.
Why?
She said because he wasn't taking the breakup well and he wanted her and didn't want anybody else to have her. That's what she said to me.
So, were you concerned for her?
I was, but she gave me the impression that it wasn't a big deal. And so I kind of just took her word for it and let her.
Riverside County Sheriff's Department with her suspicions. As it turns out, Robert Pate was already on their radar.
Everyone was whispering about Robert.
They moved pretty quickly in the direction of Robert. There was a lot of little tiny bits of information from different sources.
One of the sources was Becky's close friend, Javier Garcia Jr., who had given investigators an interesting bit of information. On the night of the murders, he says Becky had told him she was going hiking on her property with Robert and his friend Christian Smith. Tanya Friedman believes her sister probably just wanted to smooth things over with Robert.
My sister was a fixer. She loved with all of her heart, and she gave herself to everything she did.
Garcia Jr.'s lead placed Robert Pate and Christian Smith at the scene of the crime the night of the murders. With rumors pointing towards the two men, the Friedmans were sure that the case would soon be solved.
cooperating, but they just kept saying they didn't have it. They didn't have enough to make an arrest.
Private investigator Luis Bolaños saw his friend Ron grow increasingly despondent.
About 2 or 3 years into this, I'm getting updates from Ron, and I'm finding out that nothing's happening. This case has stalled. It's gone cold.
Luis and Ron had met years earlier at the sheriff's office, where Ron had been one of Luis's first training officers. Now it was time for Luis to help his old teammate.
I begged Ron for years, 2 or 3 years, let me do this for you.
Luis had also worked in the Riverside County DA's office. Although they parted on bad terms, he was certain he could get things moving again.
I knew that we can get this back on the front page where it needed to be, and get those phones burning again.
I really wasn't ready because I really felt in my heart that I thought the sheriff's department was going to solve it. I really did.
But as the 6-year anniversary of the crime approached with no arrest in sight, Ron finally gave Luis the green light. The media-savvy PI got to work, and one of his orders of business was putting up this provocative billboard.
We wanted to do it before and after. A beautiful picture of Becky, and then a simulated picture of Becky in the wheelbarrow on fire. It really, really pulled at heartstrings and sickened people.
We believe the following to be true. Luis also held a press conference at the murder site with Drew and Tanya Friedland.
We're in this because we believe this case can be solved.
We know somebody out there knows something.
Over the next year, tips started coming in. One of them from Becky's cousin, Daniela Zermania, who remembers something that
the murder, and she told me that her ex-boyfriend, Robert, had come into her work at Denny's and was harassing her. He had harassed her to the point of being removed from the restaurant.
Daniela says after the altercation, they had discussed going on that hike.
And I think talk about whatever their relationship was, how it was finishing and where it was.
And on the 7th anniversary of the crime, Luis held yet another press conference at the murder site with Daniela by his side.
The suspects then ignited the accelerant and in turn engulfed Becky in flames.
Ron believes all the media pressure paid off. A few months later, the DA's office subpoenaed Robert Payton and Christian Smith to appear before a grand jury.
It was just stirring the pot. There was something on the news every day about it, and I think they just said, all right, let's go do something, and they did.
As the grand jury drew to a close, there was news.
You're watching KPSQ, the Desert's News Leader.
2 arrests after nearly 8 years of Opinion Pines murders.
Payton and Smith were arrested for triple homicide.
I was very happy. It was probably the happiest day of my life.
But as investigators were sure the killers were finally in custody, two families say they are just as certain the men are wrongfully accused.
Innocent till proven guilty is a myth. It's guilty till proven innocent.
And the truth's going to come out. It will come out.
For over 7 years, the families of Becky Friedland, her mother Vicky, and John Hayward have been waiting for this moment.
My heart was in my stomach, seeing them in the jumpsuits and seeing them in the flesh, seeing them handcuffed.
Robert Payton and Christian Smith, both 25, found themselves in a Riverside County courthouse charged with triple homicide. Both pled not guilty.
I think they thought they were going to get away with it.
But these two men hardly fit the image of typical defendants. Neither have criminal records. Christian Smith is married and a decorated war hero. Robert Payton is also married and an active member of his church.
I had a really hard time just keeping it together, you know.
Robert's sister Christy struggled seeing him accused of the brutal murder and burning of 3 people.
Somebody like him, someone like him being put in that position, it's really hard to watch.
Christy and Robert's mother Kathleen say he is innocent and not the man he has been portrayed as in the media.
They tried to make him out to be a monster, a jealous monster, and he just isn't that.
What kind of man is he?
Robert is an amazing patient, honest. He's always there when you need him. He sort of takes care of all of us. Takes really good care of his wife.
Robert started dating his wife Sarah after his breakup with Becky.
He and his wife both have this tremendous heart for animals. He cares about people. He cares about animals. He's just got the utmost integrity. And Christy and Kathleen aren't Robert's only supporters. We've had no less than 10 or 11 people at every single hearing, and there's been 30, 33 or 34 people at one of the hearings just coming to support, and the courtroom can't even fit that many of us. People called us immediately after he was arrested, and they were like, no, this isn't right. This is not the Robert I know. Also looking on in disbelief has been Christian Smith's father, John Conrad Smith.
I know my son didn't do that. I know he's not capable of that.
Smith says his son is an honorable man and was living his dream serving his country in the military as part of the Army's elite 75th Ranger Regiment. It was in Afghanistan, as Smith says. His son became a hero.
He saved another man's life. He was actually shot through the lung. And I have a picture of him pulling him out, and two of his battle buddies, and Christian had one hand on a rifle and pulling his comrade out and firing back at Afghans.
Christian has won commendations for valor and has been awarded 2 Purple Hearts.
This one is one was wounded and he was shot through the arm. He got this one. This one was when he took the grenade shrapnel. He deserved better than this. I mean, he's put his life on the line for 5 years now. He's a good guy.
Christian Smith may be a war hero now, but investigators believe back when he was 17, he committed murder with his 18-year-old best friend, Robert Payne.
Christian Smith and Robert Payne had been really, really good friends in high school, and they both kind of beat the same drum. Robert Payne and Christian Smith both had an extreme fascination with fire.
Becky had complained about Robert and Christian to close friend Brandon Kugler Harrison.
There was one time that they were playing with fire, him and Christian. And that they set something on fire. I think it was a mattress, not 100% sure though. I remember her just getting mad at him over that and not talking to him for a couple days.
Did your son have a fascination with fire?
No. No, there was no fascination.
They were not troublemakers, they were good kids. Well, prosecutors plan on using Robert's words against him. Just a few months before the fire here at Pinyon Pines, Robert had an instant message conversation with his then girlfriend Sarah. In that exchange, Robert seemed to offer a solution to Sarah's problems with an ex-boyfriend.
Well, if you know where he lives, we can professionally burn his house down, considering how Vicky and John were killed. It's a very concerning statement. This is 8 months prior to
comment on the investigation, but 48 hours obtained a copy of the grand jury transcripts. During the proceedings, both men pled the fifth, but when questioned by police years earlier, they denied they ever went near Becky's house and said they never had any intention of hiking with her.
Robert and Christian told police during the interview that they were heading to church that night. Apparently, they made a phone call on the way there, and the church was in fact closed.
When those plans fell through, the boys said they headed back to Christian's dad's home to hang out and play video games. Where was your son the night of the murders?
You know what? I went midtown.
Well, what did he tell you when you eventually saw him?
We were here.
The boys said they eventually wound up at this middle school where they shot paintball guns.
Nobody saw Christian or Robert at the school playing paintball. Nobody. Their only alibi is each other.
But it was the boys' cell phone activity that night that raised the most red flags to investigators.
They put themselves on the other side of town, and the cell phones say differently.
At 7:13 p.m., Robert's cell phone pinged near the start of Highway 74, the road leading up to the Quigley home. Minutes later, both Christian and Robert's cell phones went silent from about 7:30 to 2 p.m., the time frame investigators believe the murders took place.
They came out of their way to find Becky. Hard to say if John and Vicky were collateral damage.
Tracks and footprints at the scene placed Becky's attack near the desert behind the house. Becky was then placed in a wheelbarrow and rolled back towards the house and set on fire. What kind of evidence was recovered from the scene that links this crime to these 2 young men?
Well, we know that at the point where the wheelbarrow rolled from, where they put Becky in the wheelbarrow, that they found a business card. And on that business card, they eventually found DNA that was consistent with DNA belonging to Christian Smith.
Inside the home, it was determined Vicky had been shot with a .40 caliber handgun and Hayward with a shotgun before the house was set on fire. When investigators searched the boys' homes a year later, they found shotguns similar to the one used in the crime. No handguns were ever recovered, but in Robert's house, there were accessories to the type of gun that may have killed Vicky.
Yeah, that's for sure. They recovered ammunition .340 cal, and a recovered holster to a Glock 40. That's a powerful piece of evidence.
You believe that police have the right men?
I think they have the right to, guys. Absolutely.
The defense lawyers charge investigators ignored other possible suspects, and that the evidence will never hold up that trial.
You have the wrong person here.
For Tanya Friedman, hearing the specific details of the murders has been difficult.
To think about how they must have been fighting for their lives, how scared all of them were, is horrifying.
And believing that one of their alleged killers was someone Becky once loved has been especially painful for Ron Friedman.
She loved him a lot. And that's probably one of the saddest parts about the whole story is, she loved him to death. And he threw it all away. For nothing.
But nothing is what defense lawyers say this case is based on.
Now, I kept looking for the proverbial other shoe. I went over it. I just didn't see it.
Richard Blumenfeld represents Robert Payne and says the case against his client is built entirely on questionable and hearsay evidence. He points to Becky's cousin, Daniela Sobeno, who said Becky had told her about a fight at Denny's the day before the murders.
Robert had gone to Becky's restaurant, and there'd been a scene, an argument, and they'd been asked to take it outside, and so on and so forth. That never happened. Never happened. Nobody could substantiate that anything like that ever happened.
Blumenfeld says a grand jury should have never heard Daniela's testimony or the evidence about the IM exchange between Robert and Sarah, in which he had seemingly suggested burning down her ex-boyfriend's house. Blumenfeld argues it was said in a joking fashion.
There were probably over 100 pages of these conversations, and they took one excerpt out of context. It was clearly not seriously said.
Blumenfeld also denies that Robert threatened Becky's life and says there would be no reason for him to be jealous or want to harm Becky because he had already moved on.
He wasn't seeing Becky anymore seriously. She was trying to revive their relationship, but he moved on. He was with Sarah.
Whether Robert had a motive or not, Christian Smith's alleged role never made any sense to his attorney, John Patrick Dolan.
The motive, if you can believe it, is he's Robert's friend and he went along with him. That's it. There's no connection with Kristen and Becky. There's nothing that suggests he has any animosity toward her. It's a pretty weak argument.
Dolan thinks all the evidence is weak, starting with the boy's lack of cell phone activity around the time frame of the murders. He says it doesn't prove anything.
And it is unusual for a teenager not to use their phone for 2.5 hours.
Well, you could say that. You could also say that he was having a shower, made dinner, and he had a paintball gun and went out and tested it out near middle school. And he didn't make any calls for 2.5 hours. It's really not that uncommon at all.
But before the boys' phones went silent, there was that cell tower ping that put Robert and presumably Christian at the start of
Christian and Robert were somewhere near Becky's home.
Well, that's one of those really interesting anomalies because a ping doesn't show at all that Kristen was anywhere near that home.
Dolan says that 3 minutes before Robert's phone pinged near Highway 74, Christian's phone picked off a cell tower miles away.
And I can tell you that prosecution's going to have a hard time getting over Mr. Smith's phone being on the other side of the Coachella Valley when they say Mr. Page's phone was pinged sometime near the time that it would have had to been an ascent up the mountain.
But the state's FBI experts say cell phones at higher elevations sometimes bounce off other towers. Pinging phones or not, investigators say there is hard evidence putting Christian at the scene, that DNA on the business card.
And that puts him there, and we know that he has denied ever being there.
Dolan questions whether the DNA is Christian's, as the prosecution says it unequivocally is, and argues that even if it is a match, Becky could have previously picked up the card from his client.
She carries it up to her house. She drops it on the ground. That doesn't prove he was there. It simply proves he touched a card. And they have to have something more than he touched a card to prove he was there committing a homicide.
And if Dolan dismisses the DNA evidence, he says the gun evidence is almost laughable.
What the argument was by the district attorney was he had access to the kinds of guns that were used. Does that make anybody guilty because they have access to the kind of gun that was used? With no ballistics, with no measurement, with no slugs, with no nothing.
And Christian's father says that the entire argument is moot anyway, as far as his son is concerned, because the guns were with him in another state the weekend of the murders.
They were with me and put in the trunk of my car.
The defense believes that other people should have been looked at more closely, like Javier Garcia Jr., that friend of Becky's who had first turned investigators towards Robert and Christian, saying they were all going hiking.
So Javier says Becky says something. How do we find out whether or not that's just him making up something because it points things elsewhere?
Some friends say Garcia Jr. wanted to be more than friends with Becky, and Dolan and Blumenfeld point out that while their clients' phones didn't ping in the mountains where Becky lived, Garcia Jr.'s did.
If you follow the route that he alleged that he took, it puts him right by Becky's residence.
Why was he driving in the area near the time that this took place? And I was told that Javier Garcia would not testify at the grand jury unless he was granted immunity. Why does he need immunity if he doesn't have anything to do with this?
Dolan also points out that Garcia Jr.'s father is an investigator in the DA's office, raising questions about a possible conflict of interest.
Interesting question about that. There was an investigation, by the way, and to be fair, we have to say, the Attorney General came down and looked at it and said, it doesn't look like there's any conflict.
Extremely forthcoming with the police and was instrumental in the investigation.
Former federal prosecutor Eduardo Roy represents Javier Garcia Jr. He says Javier's only role is that of key witness and not as a suspect.
He was asked to testify before a grand jury.
Yes, he was.
Did he?
He did not.
Why?
We were there. And then it was decided that they didn't need it.
Didn't you ever ask for immunity for Javier? I asked for them to be clear before I made him available. He was not a target or suspect of the investigation.
Why?
Because I'm a very good lawyer, that's why.
Roy says the reason why Garcia Jr. was driving in the area before the murders was because he wanted to join the group going hiking, but Becky told him not to come.
So he turned around and went home, and what the police did was track where he was.
Police determined Javier Garcia Jr. was back on the desert floor at the time of the murders and ruled him out as a suspect. And Daniela Zermeño independently backs up Javier's story that Becky planned to go hiking with Robert and a friend the night of the murders.
They had a definite plan to go hiking, the three of them.
The Friedlichs believe the evidence, circumstantial or not, paints a damning picture.
When you put it all together, it's them.
I can only hope and pray that a jury of their peers will hear the evidence and come back with a guilty verdict.
I call it the drive of tears.
Almost every Saturday for the last 6 months, John Conrad Smith makes the hour drive to visit his son at the Riverside County Jail.
I just think about Christian, and I cry all the way up and all the way back.
Smith says Christian has missed a deployment with his unit and is all but certain to miss out on a huge life event. His wife Jackie is about to give birth to their first child.
He's not going to be there for that birth. He's not going to be able to see that birth, and it's horrible. I mean, he's taking it hard. And to see him in that orange jumpsuit, it breaks my heart. It breaks his heart.
Robert Pink's mother, Kathleen, has also been having a hard time seeing her son behind bars.
The thought goes through your head like, will I ever be able to touch him?
But there is another parent out there who wakes up each morning thinking these men are exactly where they belong.
One of the first things I do in the morning is I get a cup of coffee and I go outside. I think about Becky and I think about those two boys in jail.
After years of waiting, the Friedlichs and Haywards feel they are one step closer to justice as they wait for a trial date to be set.
If I'm not guilty, so be it. If they found guilty, then they're going to pay for the crime that they committed.
But the case was about to take an unexpected turn. 8 years after the murders, the prosecutor assigned to this case walked inside this courthouse and asked that all charges against Robert Pate and Christian Smith be dropped.
A bombshell out of an Indio courtroom today. Charges dropped.
Really emotional. Yeah, I mean, I'm just happy. I'm happy he's coming home. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go get him right now. The DA's office offered little explanation for their decision. In a prepared statement, they said legal issues had arisen during the grand jury proceedings against Robert Pate, making it appropriate to ultimately dismiss the charges against both men. The system worked. I have faith in my son, and that's all I can tell you. The dismissal was so unexpected that neither man was in the courtroom that day. Christian's dad broke the news to him from outside the jail. You've been released. You've been released. Your mom and I and everybody's here. The baby's on her way. We're just waiting for you to get the paperwork done for you to walk out that door. We're all waiting outside for you, son. And just a few hours later, Christian Smith, with Robert Payne closely behind, walked out together. Christian held his 2-week-old daughter Zoe for the first time.
Just want to be with my beautiful baby girl and my amazing wife and loyal family. My brother's over in the military. And I've been loyal to me throughout this whole thing. I just hope I can move on with my life with this family.
Robert's family was waiting for him. Location nearby. What was it like hugging your son when you walked out?
Oh my gosh. That first time holding him, I didn't want to let him go, but I had to scoot over and let her hug him, let his wife hug him.
But it may not be completely over for Peyton Smith. The DEA can technically refile charges against the men if new evidence emerges. Tanya Friedland has always been convinced that they had the right men.
And I have thought about if they get away with murder, to know in my heart that Christian and Robert took my family from me and could get away with it. I hope that they have to think about this every day for the rest of their life.
In June 2016, Robert Pape and Christian Smith were rearrested for the murders. The state suspended better cell phone tracking and more evidence that links Christian Smith to that business card found at the crime scene.
And they say in 2018 in January, we had a fingerprint match that we couldn't make since 2006. Sounds a little fishy.
Christian Smith's lawyer, John Patrick Dolan, says investigators had tunnel vision.
I think they began with the conclusion that my client and Mr. Pape are guilty and tried to collect evidence to support that rather than evaluating the evidence and see where it takes them.
The trial began in April 2018, almost 12 years after the crime. Dolan and Pape's new attorney, Jeff Moore, launched a vigorous defense, raising questions about the credibility of the state's new informant, who has had his own legal troubles, and the accuracy of the cell phone tracking and forensic evidence.
This is about as paper-thin case as I've ever seen.
After more than a month of trial, the case went to the jury. They would deliberate 10 agonizing days before giving word that they had finally reached a verdict. Robert Pape and Christian Smith were found guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of Vicky Friedley and John Hayward. Pape was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Becky Friedley.
I waited 11 years, 9 months for this day, and I'm very happy. There is no closure. Becky's gone. Vicky, John, they'll never come back.
But what the victim's family see as a right verdict is viewed as a terrible injustice by 2 other families. Robert Pape's mother was devastated. A jury has finally decided who was responsible for the murder of 3 people in Pinyon Pines. But the destruction left by that terrible night remains.
There's something inherently sexy in a Versace design. There is flamboyance that is contained and controlled. The closely works of a message about how the world perceives us. It's as a real wow factor. I'm Tim Gunn, and I am the mentor on Project Runway. The Versace customer was not made apart. One of the most iconic Versace
also. I mean, he took her from trashy to sophisticated.
Versace helped put Miami on the international map. My name is Tara Solomon, and I am the Miami Herald's former nightlife correspondent. Versace brought his entire world of fabulosity. And while he may have had homes all around the world, he came to Miami Beach to relax.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that Versace had been murdered? Oh, I remember profoundly. I opened up my computer and it flashed before me that Gianni Versace had been murdered. I was stunned.
When Versace was killed, there was pure pandemonium.
On that particular morning, Gianni Versace decided to go over to Cindy's Cafe, and it was on his return home, approaching the door, he was shot and killed. And on the set we had bang, bang, 2 shots. Do you remember where roughly he was? He was right here. And there was obviously blood. Yes, plenty of blood. If you mention Gianni Versace, people still don't remember those names of the first few people that were killed.
There was the homicide of Jeff Trail and David Manson. There was the murder of Lee Miglin. Then there was the murder of William Reese. We have what we typically call a spree killer. This wasn't a haphazard crime. Mr. Versace was targeted.
World famous fashion designer Gianni Versace fatally shot gunned down outside his mansion in Miami Beach, Florida, turned into a gruesome crime scene early this morning. 5 days before he was murdered, Gianni Versace and his partner Antonio D'Amico had arrived at Casa Casuarina, their lavish Miami Beach retreat. They'd been in Paris and New York. Versace could not have known it, but his killer was already in town. The 911 call came in about 8:45 the morning of July 15th, 1997, just as Carlos Noriega, then a lieutenant with the Miami Beach Police Department, was heading to work.
I drove over to the scene and encountered an area just flooded with police officers. There was evidence at the front steps. There was blood. There was clothing. Gianni Versace was an icon. You have a world-renowned fashion designer celebrity who was tragically killed. This was all hands on deck. You know, as soon as exactly.
It all happened in broad daylight. Versace had gone out alone to a local cafe to buy magazines. Then he walked home.
As he was putting the key in the lock, he was shot twice. Once in the face, point blank range, and the other one was behind the left ear in the neck, and that was a through and through shot.
Noriega believes the gunman approached Versace from behind or from the side.
I believe he was shadowing him. It was a very strategically timed, strategically placed attack to kill Gianni Versace.
The question was, who would want to kill him?
One of the first motives that we felt was a possibility was that it was a contracted organized crime mafia, if you will, because there was a dead bird found next to the body. Is that a sign? That to us, that's a sign of a mafia hit.
But the bird, it turned out, was in the wrong place, the wrong time, hit by a fragment from a bullet that killed Versace. And that left police with not much to go on. But not for long. They got a break from Lázaro Quintana, who was a friend of Versace's.
He used to call me Lazareta.
Lázaro was at the mansion.
Antonio got up and he went to the window that faces the gate to enter the mansion. And he yelled out, "No, no." And I ran out. You came here? I came here. Johnny was right here.
Versace was already dead on the front steps.
And then Antonio came, and he's crying, and he was destroyed. He was destroyed. And he's who did this? Who did this? And there was a lady standing here, and she's pointing, but she couldn't speak. Antonio said, "Go get him." So I went after him.
Lazaro followed the gunman.
We're talking this pace, real fast. I yell, "You bastard! Why did you do this? Why did you do this?" He makes a left turn. As he makes the left turn, yes, he makes the left turn, and we're still going all the way through. He turns over to the right, and car's coming, so I couldn't get across. Car stops, and they yell, "He's got a gun." He stops right across here, at the alley. That's when he's pointing the gun at me.
Show me how he pointed the gun at you, if I knew. So he didn't even look at you?
No, never looked at me.
You never saw his face, but you saw his clothes?
Yes.
The shooter cut through this alley while Lazaro raced around the corner. He remembered seeing a police officer there earlier.
I reached him and I said to him, "Mr. Versace has just been shot."
Were you calm? Were you?
No. A friend of mine was just shot. No, was I calm? I was nervous. I was upset.
You came down the street with the police officer.
I did.
Luckily, he came upon some men in front of this building and asked them if they saw a man running.
And they pointed. They pointed to the garage.
He said he went in here.
He went in here. So that's when I told the officer, I said, "He's in there. Go get him. Go get him." Then we heard over the radio the commotion, and okay, now there is a manhunt.
When police searched the 13th Street garage, they discovered a pile of clothes. A gray t-shirt and black shorts. Just what Lazaro had seen the shooter wearing. He had obviously changed clothes. When he walked out of this garage just shortly after the murder, nobody knew who the shooter was. Nobody knew what he looked like. Nobody knew what he was wearing. He was able to just vanish. But he left a mountain of evidence for investigators. Next to that pile of clothes was a truck that had been reported stolen in New Jersey. And inside the truck were documents with a name.
He left his identification in the truck. That's correct. He had his passport, an ID, a whole lot of items that connected him right away.
By 12 noon, some 3 hours after Johnny Versace was murdered, police had a suspect. His name, Andrew Cunanan. And as it were,
In Milan, Italy today, those who knew and admired Gianni Versace said goodbye to the murdered fashion designer.
1 week after Johnny Versace was murdered, celebrities and friends from around the world gathered inside this Gothic cathedral in Milan, Italy, for his funeral.
I saw Versace's funeral on television, and I cried. It was hard. It was tough. Princess Diana was there at the funeral. Sting, Trudy, Elton.
In Miami, not far from where he was murdered, there was a small, intimate service to celebrate the designer's life. The flowers left on the steps of Versace's opulent mansion served as one somber reminder of what had happened.
But we consider Andrew Cunanan to be armed and to be extremely dangerous.
The police activity was another. They were tracking every lead they could, hunting for Johnny Versace's suspected killer, 27-year-old Andrew Cunanan.
You had a very good suspect.
Michael Band was the prosecutor assigned to this case.
And our first step was to go out into the community with pictures of Cunanan and start beating the bushes and looking for this guy. Looking to figure out, is this the guy?
Authorities were starting to learn all about Andrew Cunanan. 3 months before Versace's murder, Cunanan was living in San Diego, and his life was, to say the least, complicated.
I thought he'd be a very successful businessman, or maybe in the fashion industry, or something star quality.
Back in the 80s, Robert Ehring Ahrens remembers his 7th grade classmate Andrew Cunanan as a good-looking kid with a keen fashion sense.
I remember Andrew would put dimes as penny loafers. It was always that little extra something that made him sort of stand out and get noticed. Andrew sort of had this air about him that I thought was kind of beyond his years at that time.
According to Ahrens, Andrew Cunanan grew up in a working-class San Diego suburb and did not share much about his home life.
I had no idea who his mom was, his dad, whether he had brothers or sisters. I had no idea he was half Filipino.
Broker. He and Andrew's mother, Mary Ann, raised 4 children together. But Andrew stood out. He had a genius IQ, so he enrolled in the pricey and prestigious Bishop School in the Tony Beach enclave of La Jolla.
When I heard that he was going to La Jolla and transferred to Bishop's, I thought, well, you got to have money. It's a private school.
The class of 1987 mentioned Andrew Cunanan as most likely to be remembered. He chose a quote from King Louis XV to accompany his senior photo. Après-moi, le déluge. After me, the deluge. Turns out those words could have been an omen. A year after Andrew's high school graduation, his father was facing embezzlement charges. He fled the country, leaving his family abandoned and broke.
He was openly gay in high school and very flamboyant.
When 48 Hours first spoke to Nicole Murray Ramirez back in 1997, he knew Andrew Cunanan. Today, he still remembers Cunanan as the young man who didn't have a job, but was a big spender and an even bigger talker.
Andrew Cunanan was basically known in the gay community's nightlife and the bar scene. He would walk in with an entourage and always pay for the bill. He wanted the illusion that it was his money. He tried to brag that he came from a Filipino family and he knew them out of Marcos.
Michael Williams owned a local restaurant and knew Andrew Cunanan. He also knew where Cunanan really got all that money.
He had a very wealthy older partner who really provided for him.
How much older?
I would say probably by 40 years.
What did you make of that relationship?
I stopped trying to figure that out. I was like, here's this young, attractive, good-looking guy with this extremely older man. I mean, I can't imagine what the connection was there.
I would imagine that you had an idea what the connection was.
I did,
Michael Williams was introduced to Andrew through their mutual friend, a young ensign named Jeff Trail.
Andrew was very pretentious, loud, always had to be the center of the party. Jeff was opposite of that. Jeff was pretty conservative and quiet, always helping people.
Trail was an Annapolis graduate and a Gulf War veteran living in San Diego. He was also gay, as out as was true to the military. In 1993, when he appeared in silhouette for a 48 Hours interview, he talked to us about issues affecting gay people in the military.
We're not here to be feared. We just want to do our jobs. That's all we're asking for.
While Trail and Cunanan were friends, to the best of anybody's knowledge, that is all they were.
Jeff was always had the contagious personality where you just wanted to be around him. And I think that, in a way, Andrew wanted that in his life. So surrounding himself around Jeff, he always seemed very happy and up.
You did not like Andrew?
No.
For reasons known only to Cunanan, he sometimes used the name Andrew De Silva. That's how Michael Williams knew him, and he would soon learn a lot more about Andrew. Who he was and what he would do would change the life of Michael Williams and end the lives of 5 innocent victims. Tracing Andrew Cunanan's blood-soaked path to Johnny Versace's front door means following a series of unexplainable events punctuated with unfathomable viciousness. None of the dots are easily connected, except in the believes his friend knew Cunanan had lived a dangerous life.
Andrew had a past of dealing drugs. He had a past of prostitution. And I really think that Jeff was trying to pull him out of that.
Williams says Jeff Trail had left the Navy and was training to join the California Highway Patrol. And then, suddenly, and with no explanation, in the fall of 1996, Trail moved to Minneapolis.
The day that he got in the car to leave, I said, please be safe. And he reached under the seat and he pulled out his handgun. And he said, I'm going to be safe. I got this.
Around that same time, Jeff Trail's friend, Andrew Cunanan, was struggling, according to Nicole Murray Ramirez.
He was not good looking anymore. He had to look in the mirror and saw what I saw, which was a 6 going down to a 4. What was left for his life?
Cunanan had gained weight and given away much of his expensive designer wardrobe.
He had dabbled into drugs. He was now an older young man with average look.
With him,
I surmise that Andrew one day woke up after his older boyfriend broke up the relationship. And what's next? How is he going to live?
He lost the money, the mansion, and all that went with it.
He lived off other people. He also was someone who was revengeful.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole.
This is not someone that you break up with easily, because when you're grandiose and you're the center of the world, people don't break up with you.
And then, for reasons Cunanan never fully explained, on Friday, April 25th, 1997, he went to Minneapolis. He flew from San Diego on a one-way ticket.
Do you think that he went up to Minneapolis with murder on his mind?
Yes, I think that he did.
Cunanan knew people in Minneapolis. Jeff Trail was there. And Michael Williams thinks something happened between the two of them.
I called to check on Jeff, and he was just really depressed. It alarmed me. We'd never had a conversation like that. I asked him, have you spoken to Andrew? And he said, no, and I'll never speak again. That's odd.
Cunanan knew somebody else in Minneapolis, a 33-year-old architect named David Madsen. Cunanan and Madsen had had a relationship.
He loved to laugh, and he always had big energy.
Julie Hovland was David Madsen's friend and co-worker.
He problem solving. We talked about world issues. He was a down-to-earth person.
Did David ever mention Andrew Cunanan?
Yes, he did. I think he had a fling with Andrew. I don't think it was anything serious because there were other people in his life that he cared about more. He didn't care about Andrew that much, really.
But according to Cunanan's friends, Andrew believed David was the love of his life. Julie Hovland didn't talk to David Madsen over the weekend. On Monday, she was surprised when he didn't show up at work. And by Tuesday, everyone was worried.
I called him. He went to voice messaging, and a couple of my coworkers went to his house over lunch hour on Tuesday. Heard his dog barking in the apartment.
She didn't know it.
It was noticeable as soon as you opened the door to walk in. Nobody made any effort to conceal or hide it.
When retired Minneapolis homicide detective Dale Barsness arrived at Madsen's apartment, what he saw was gruesome. There was a bloody body wrapped in a rug.
I thought he was dead that day. I pretty much cried the whole night, and then later we found out that it wasn't David's body in the carpet.
How did you feel when you heard that?
Shocked, but then, what happened?
The body in David Madsen's apartment was Jeff Trail. He had been beaten to death with a hammer, And not far from the body, police found a duffel bag with a name on it. Andrew Cunanan.
This is the travel bag that we believe Andrew Cunanan brought to Minneapolis on April 25th.
But where was Andrew Cunanan? And where was David Madsen? The trail stayed cold for just 4 days, and then on Saturday morning, 2 fishermen found the body of a young man on the shores of East Rush Lake, about an hour north of Minneapolis. It was David Madsen. He'd been shot in the head.
We learned that David died pretty soon after Jeff Trail. Oh my gosh, to me, in the situation that David's in with this crazy person, and how scary for him. I'm sure he tried to calm Andrew down. I'm sure there was survival mode going on. Like, how do you diffuse the situation? But he obviously failed at that, and he lost his life because of that.
Ballistic tests showed the bullets used to kill Madsen from a .40 caliber gun, like the one Jeff Trail had taken to Minneapolis. Police believe Cunanan took that gun.
Presumably, when you were able to link Madsen's death to Trail's death, that changed the whole investigation. Yeah, now we're down there. Where's Andrew?
There were tire tracks near Madsen's body, and his car, a red Jeep, was missing. But it would not stay missing for long.
72-year-old Lee Miglin was found tortured and stabbed in the garage of his mansion on Chicago's Gold Coast.
On the morning of May 3rd, 1997, Stephen and Barbara Byer found the body of their neighbor, Lee Miglin. He was a wealthy real estate developer.
I can still picture it today. I could see the points of his shoes. And I said, chilling.
Inside Lee Miglin's townhouse, there was some money and other things missing, and there was evidence the killer had stayed a while. Police photos show he had shaved and taken a bath.
Debris in the kitchen sink, melted ice cream coming out of their containers. Then in Lee's library, finding this large ham sliced sitting on his desk. That was plenty to recognize that something very, very bad had gone on.
Around the corner from the murder scene, police would discover David Madsen's red Jeep. But now, Lee Miglin's green Lexus was missing. To this day, police do not know what, if any, connection Cunanan had to Miglin. But they feared Cunanan would strike again. After Andrew Cunanan murdered Jeff Trail, David Madsen, and Lee Miglin, the gay community was terrified, especially in San Diego.
I think everybody was in a state of shock. I think some people were in a state of fear. People didn't answer their doors. People that knew him the most stayed other places.
Michael Williams relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona.
Everybody was on very high alert
because he didn't know where he was going to strike again.
Yeah.
Just 6 days after he killed Miglin, while Cunanan was on the run in Miglin's green Lexus, police believe he realized the FBI was tracking the car phone's signal. He needed a new vehicle.
He's believed to have struck here in Pennsville Friday afternoon at the remote Finns Point Cemetery at Fort Lott Park.
FBI's been working currently with the New Jersey State Police.
The Lexus was found at this cemetery in southern New Jersey. Inside the office lay victim number 4. He was 45-year-old William Reese. He'd been shot in the head, and his red pickup was gone.
Yeah, all he was a caretaker at a cemetery.
Minneapolis Detective Dale Barsness says William Reese was killed simply for his truck.
No, he just was a very poor man in the wrong place. Absolutely the wrong time and alone.
You're somewhere in Scottsdale. He's last heard of in New Jersey. Can you relax?
No.
Gianni Versace was in Europe working on what would be his final collection. Andrew Cunanan was the focus of a nationwide manhunt. He was featured on America's Most Wanted.
Police say Cunanan may be wearing glasses.
And earned a spot on FBI's 10 Most Wanted list.
You think he enjoyed the attention that he got?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole.
He basically held the United States hostage because we were looking for him everywhere. We didn't know where he was.
O'Toole says having murdered 4 men in 3 states over 12 days, Cunanan was now considered a spree killer.
A spree killer continues and continues and continues and does not back into their normal life. Life as they know it. It's done.
So O'Toole believes Cunanan knew he had nothing to lose.
There's no way to undo what he's done now. Absolutely no way. So he's really boxed himself into a corner. From a behavioral standpoint, that makes him more dangerous.
But then, for 2 months, there was no sign of Cunanan. Until July 15th, 1997, when he struck again. This time was different, because this time, his victim was Gianni Versace.
When you heard that he had done it again, do you remember how you felt?
Every time there was another killing, it was almost like you're being stabbed. It's that rush of pain, and you're just automatically, oh my God, why can't they touch me?
There's no question that he knew that we were hot on the spot.
Carlos Noriega remembers that within hours, hundreds of police officers piled onto Miami Beach.
We all but locked down the causeways and the ways in and out of the city, and I believe that created a bottleneck where he felt uncomfortable trying to leave the city.
With all the attention on this case, every day brought a flood of tips.
The tips that were coming in were overwhelming at times.
Especially since this was Detective Gus Sanchez's first homicide investigation.
Were you nervous at all?
Of course I was. Yeah. We know already that he had killed numerous people. I remember going to different locations, knocking on doors. It always crosses your mind that Cunanan could be in there armed, and he could shoot through the door.
Detectives soon learned Cunanan had been in Miami Beach for about 2 months.
He was sort of hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. The police had missed several opportunities to get him. About a week before he killed Versace, Cunanan pawned a gold coin stolen from Lee Miglin. How'd the pawn shop know it was him? He told them.
On the coin about a week.
It was on a form the pawn shop was required to send to the Miami Beach Police Department. It arrived 5 days before the murder.
Or we did not have an automated system at the time.
It was just one of many forms, and unfortunately, nobody looked at it.
Did you think, why didn't we know this before Gianni Versace was killed? That thought went through my mind several times because apparently he was on the beach for a period of time.
Cunanan listed his address as the Normandy Plaza Hotel.
It was a dump. You and I would stay in that hotel.
He'd registered under his own name.
It must drive you nuts to know that this guy was walking around free as a bird. Right? I mean, just the fact that this guy was being looked for speaks to the fact that he was able to blend it and change his appearance and successfully just stay one step ahead that way.
Things might have turned out differently if police had a little more luck. 4 days before Versace was killed, someone at this sub shop recognized Cunanan from the America's Most Wanted story. He called the police, but they arrived too late.
I was disappointed. I was frustrated. It's just unfortunate that we didn't catch him before it happened.
After Versace's murder, with Cunanan up loose, anxiety grew.
Let me assure you that Miami Beach and Dade County are safe.
I was afraid.
Remember, Versace's friend, Lazaro Quintana, had chased Cunanan.
So I told the officer, go get him. He's in there. Go get him.
He knew who I was, but I didn't know who he was. How did you behave when you were out? Scared?
Cautious, looking over my shoulder a lot.
Literally?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, I mean, I got goosebumps on it, absolutely. This man had a gun. This man knew what he was doing.
The longer Cunanan dodged police, the more intense the hunt became.
I think the police were getting anxious. Where could he be? What kind of resources did he have?
Former prosecutor Michael Band.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure on law enforcement. The whole world's watching, but we don't want anybody else dead.
There was a sense that maybe we lost him by some people. I just thought that he was hiding out.
And then the tip came in that would change everything.
I get a call, Michael. I think we found him.
I heard over the police radio that there had been a shot fired. We got him.
After a 9-day manhunt, Miami Beach detective Gus Sanchez believed Andrew Cunanan was finally cornered on a houseboat just 40 blocks from where he had shot down Johnny Versace. When Sanchez arrived, it was a standoff.
At this point, nobody's seen Cunanan on the houseboat. No, there's no confirmation at this point.
The houseboat's caretaker saw signs of a break-in. When he went inside, a shot was fired. Police quickly surrounded the houseboat.
They are communicating by bullhorn with the houseboat.
After a 4-hour siege, the SWAT team fired tear gas and went on board. When it was safe, prosecutor Michael Band followed them.
It was a mess. It was just a mess.
In an upstairs bedroom, they found a body.
I just recall an individual lying on the bed, looking up. He had a bullet wound in his head. There's a gun next to him.
When you looked at that face, what did your gut tell you?
My gut told me it's him.
But that wasn't enough.
I wanted his fingerprints.
As Band waited, an expert at the scene compared fingerprints from the corpse with Cunanan's.
He looks up and he says, it's him.
Reign of terror brought upon us by Andrew Cunanan is over.
It turned out Cunanan shot himself with the same gun he used to kill Johnny Versace, William Reese, and David Madsen. It was the gun he had taken from his friend and first victim, Jeff Trail.
There was a sense of relief.
But this was not the outcome Michael Williams hoped for.
I didn't want him to do anything but go to jail and rot.
Andrew Cunanan's suicide left the world with a pile of questions. Was there any connection between Johnny Versace and Andrew Cunanan? There have always been rumors. There is no hard evidence.
Do you think they knew each other? I think there's a strong possibility that they crossed paths before. And that plays into his motive. I think so. I think they knew each other. Or he wanted to be in his circle and maybe he was rejected. This is all speculation.
There is some sense it's not complete. Why did he do it? What was the folks in Minnesota? Why Chicago? Why New Jersey? Why Versace? Was there a connection there? Was this just some sort of serendipitous, unfortunate occasion where just two lives entered?
20 years after Versace's death, Tim Gunn says Versace's influence still lives.
Sexy, alluring, gorgeous red carpet gowns, it's all attributable to Johnny Versace.
Singer Bruno Mars not only wears Versace, he mentions Versace in one of his songs. If guys like Bruno Mars are singing about Johnny Versace 20 years after his death, what in your mind does that say about Johnny Versace?
That he's fully embedded in our society and culture and has a profound legacy.
I feel his presence when I'm designing.
Diana Aguilar, a Project Runway contestant, was just a teenager when Versace was killed.
There are Versace elements in what you're wearing today?
Yes. Tim Gunn saw this and he said, this looks like Versace. And I was like, yes, mission accomplished.
Of course, the memories are infinitely more personal for Michael Williams, who lost his best friend. And 2 decades later, it still hurts.
This hasn't left you. I'm better. It's taken me years. You know, if it was just Jeff being killed, would be one thing. But then you got David, Lee Miglin, William Race, and Johnny Versace. 5 people that you're now connected to.
It is a connection no one would ever seek. The world lost an icon, but 5 families lost.
Part of the naivety and the beauty of youth is you're invincible. You know, at 20, you don't think anything's going to harm you.
In 1989, Tiffany Sessions was a 20-year-old college student at the University of Florida.
She was really warm and friendly, always had a smile on her face, fun. She was, I would say, a really fun-loving girl. My name is Kathleen Freza, and I was Tiffany's roommate. When she came back from Christmas break, she had started exercising. She's like, I've been walking, I've been losing weight, I'm feeling really good. She's like, come with me. So at certain times I would go with her. On February 9th, I did not go with Tiffany. She left around 4:45. 5:40 rolls around, the sun's going down, Tiffany's still not back. It was very unlike her. I went out, I got in the car, I drove around the route to see, I don't know, maybe she fell down and she hurt herself, but nothing. I never heard from her again.
She's a smart kid, she's resourceful, and if she's in trouble, she's going to do everything she can to get out of it. And I just hope that if anybody's got her, they know that we're willing to do anything to get her back. What would you say to her if you could now? I love her.
How long will you look for her?
Well, I think till day I die. I mean, how do you not look for your kid? I can't stop. I began my investigation into the disappearance of Tiffany Sessions in January of 2013. There have been many leads over the years, but none of them have panned out. I learned 3 years after the disappearance of Tiffany Sessions, another 20-year-old college student was found less than a mile away. Her name was Beth Foster. I started to wonder if the killer of Beth Foster could be the killer of Tiffany Sessions. This was Beth Foster's head, and this was her feet. First question I had is, well, did anyone check the surrounding area for other graves?
And how easy would it be to hide a body?
Very easy. I thought we would find her in 24 hours, and then 24 days, and then 24 months. I never thought in 24 years we'd still be here. I think we're very close. I think there's a good chance she's there.
The lost daughter.
Anything going around? Heavenly Father, we have a simple prayer. It's really simple. Help us find Tiffany. You know, without your grace, without your blessing, it won't happen. Amen. Amen. Let's go. Do it.
For 25 years, Pat and Hillary Sessions have been searching for their daughter Tiffany. And in January 2014, in this forest in Gainesville, Florida, just over a mile from where Tiffany disappeared,
there was another girl in 1992 who was actually found here on site.
They hope they may finally find her.
I am extremely optimistic.
What are you feeling going into this excavation? Are you nervous?
I'm a lot more nervous than I thought I would be. I've done other searches, and this one I'm a lot more nervous about because it may not be true, but it sort of feels like a final hurrah. You know, I pushed and pushed so many people for so long. I don't know how long.
emotion comes because maybe it's the end, or maybe it's not.
Yeah, I don't know. It needs to end. Everybody needs closure on this.
In 1989, Tiffany Sessions was a junior studying finance at the University of Florida in Gainesville. She had dreams of running a company one day.
She knew what she wanted to do. She knew where she was going to go.
She was determined to make something out of herself.
Tiffany had a good role model. Pat Sessions was a well-known marketing executive for a giant real estate company in South Florida. He oversaw the creation of Weston, one of the biggest building projects in the United States.
She kind of wanted to be like Dad, following your footsteps.
I've been told that by her friends.
Pat and Hillary divorced when Tiffany was just 8 months old. Hillary was in the U.S. Air Force, and as she traveled around the country,
Disciplinarian, the provider. There wasn't anything that we didn't do together. And we worked as a team.
You called her your masterpiece.
I did. Because I only had one. I worked really hard on making sure that she was as nice on the inside as she was on the outside.
Growing up, Tiffany didn't see a lot of her father, but in her teens, they reconnected. Pat was in his late 30s, a bachelor, living in an oceanfront home in Miami's affluent Coconut Grove.
The summers were the times that we spent together. Holidays.
Tiffany also got to know her half-brother, Jason.
My father is always a very active, fun guy, so when we came together for those different times, we were always doing the experiences, going on the boat, the beach, different activities like that. So yeah, that's where we really got to know each other.
Both of them were single kids, so they didn't have anybody else. They bonded together very quickly.
But for Pat, missing out on so much of his daughter's childhood had taken its toll.
There was a lot of catch-up, and overcoming a lot of bad history between her mother and I.
Tiffany was very close to both her parents. Kathleen Frezza, Tiffany's college roommate.
She loved her mom, and they had a very special relationship. She spoke with her frequently, almost daily, I would say, on the phone. With her dad, because she was able to renew that relationship with him, that was really very touching for her.
And when Pat bought his daughter a Rolex watch, Kathleen says Tiffany never took it off.
She just loved it, partly because it was a Rolex, partly because it was from her dad, so it held a really special emotional tie for her.
In fact, Kathleen has never forgotten one of the last conversations she had with Tiffany, just before she went out for that final walk.
Before she walked out, Tiffany said, "I'm going to take off my jewelry." She said, "I'm keeping my watch on. If somebody comes after me, they're going to have to fight me for the watch."
Tiffany never returned or parted while on an evening walk.
When Tiffany did not come back, I still had hope at that time.
I just really am still pretty hopeful and continue to believe that she will return safely. There were people in the apartment, outside the apartment, milling around, trying to figure out what we needed to do.
The day after Tiffany went missing, Pat and Hillary arrived in Gainesville.
I got here, I didn't even rent a car. I did a cab because I assumed all this was going to be over relatively quickly. Tiffany would give me a ride back to the airport.
But Pat knew the situation was serious when he learned that Tiffany had left the apartment with only her watch and her Walkman.
She didn't have her wallet, her driver's license, her car was there, and that was the scary part.
I think there was a sense of urgency here.
Jim Eckert was one of the lead investigators on the case.
This young woman didn't have any, baggage, as it were. It wasn't like we had a boyfriend or some strained relationship. She was a good student. It was pretty much always on the mark. So for her not to have shown up was pretty unusual.
She's a smart kid. She's resourceful. And if she's in trouble, she's going to do everything she can to get out of it.
Pat sprang into action. He put his marketing skills to work and organized one of the largest missing person searches in Florida history.
I need your help. I need the word to get out to it. From day one, he was so driven, he ran like a business. He really did.
We were attempting to find Tiffany, and we were just investigating everything.
Pat brought in Wayne Black, a private investigator who specialized in recovering missing children.
Pat had, within, I think, 24 hours, Tiffany's picture on the inside of every pizza box being delivered in Alachua County.
If you see anything or talk to anyone or hear anything, please give us a call.
Volunteers blanketed the state with flyers, put Tiffany's face on billboards, and answered a 1-800 hotline. Jason Sessions, just 17, also helped to get the word out.
Without keys, without jewelry, without makeup, that's not Tiffany.
It was amazing to me how small South Florida became, and understanding who Tiffany Sessions was and what we were doing and what we were going through.
All right, I really appreciate you calling, and probably somebody was calling back from the actually just.
My goal was very simple. It was to make sure that everybody that I could knew what she looked like. To try and get as many people out there looking for her as I could.
I'm curious whether that helped you with the emotional side of things.
Yes,
to be able to look at this from a business marketing point of view.
Yes, because I felt useful. Because I felt in control. For every 50 people who pass out a flyer, one story that you all can run does 100 times that.
Pat set up press conferences and recruited his famous friends, like football legend Dan Marino.
So what I'm going to try to do to help this team is to try to call on all my friends throughout the NFL. Today, you can push a button, you reach a million people. Facebook, you can try to get some nationwide coverage for Tiffany to try to help her. In those days, TV was my Facebook.
Politician Jeb Bush also helped out, and so did America's Most Wanted host John Walsh, whose son Adam was abducted and killed in 1981.
I know the nightmare firsthand of having a missing child and what he's going through. We can only assume that she is alive, that she is somewhere, and we just hope that there will be some type of word and that she will spread the word.
So people are committed because he just asked, but come help me. And he's irresistible in that regard.
Just 1 week after Tiffany disappeared, over 700 people showed up to search the area around Tiffany's walking route, hoping to find any clues as to what happened to her.
There's something out there somewhere. We just have to turn it up. It was freezing cold that day. It was a terrible day. It was drizzling. It was cold.
When you find any evidence, just stay away from it. Let me know. I'll come take a look at it.
We had busloads of troops who came in to help us with the search. We had Dolphins players, all of our friends and family from South Florida who were up here.
Start down there by that fence.
We went real hard at the area where she walked, trying to find her Walkman, trying to find her watch, trying to find anything.
And it turns up.
Zero. Absolute zero. Not a thing.
That was the longest drive home, because I was so euphoric that, well, we're going to find something. I think the hardest part was, what do I do now? If you're trying to solve the case, I would imagine you went up and down this road a lot. Former Detective Jim Eckert still remembers every step of the walking route he thinks Tiffany Sessions took the night she disappeared.
This was all thick woods.
So it would have been fairly easy to snatch
It was what you call a private place. This was a huge construction site with a lot of people coming and going.
He always wondered if Tiffany's abductor could have worked here at Hunter's Run.
We talked to certainly as many as we could.
And nothing.
Nothing.
The hotline was receiving as many as 600 calls per day. But in 1989, technology was so primitive, detectives were quickly overwhelmed.
We were using DOS systems and sticking big disks in computers, and most cops didn't even know how to do that. Yeah, we didn't have a fax machine.
They didn't have a fax machine.
So I bought one.
How many leads came in?
Too many. I'm always worried that there was so much that it got lost in the shuffle.
Something fell through the cracks. Weeks turned to months.
First month or two, still had a lot of hope. Every day that goes by, the odds drop astronomically. I knew that things were not looking good.
And then detectives received a promising lead. An anonymous inmate wrote that Michael Knickerbocker, a convicted serial rapist and murderer, serving 5 life sentences, confessed to killing Tiffany Sessions. You went and talked to her.
He was a spooky guy. You got bad vibes off of him. Like, well, did you do this? No.
That he killed Tiffany. But he did confess that he was the one who wrote the letter as a mean joke.
These guys do that. I I mean, I can show you 50 letters I got from guys in jail. I realized early on that I was dealing with a whole subculture of people that were just subhuman.
When the Knickerbocker lead fell apart, Pat offered a cash reward, hoping someone would come forward with the information about his daughter.
When you put out a reward, it happens in every case. You get every nut job.
But one lead seemed credible.
You get your hopes up. You think, maybe this is it.
It was from a man who said he knew where Tiffany was and that she was sick and in need of medical attention.
She's done half.
The caller sent Pat on a wild car chase all over Miami.
He says, you hang up, I'm going to kill her.
But the caller turned out to be a professional con artist. He was caught by the FBI and sent away to prison for a little over 6 years.
I was emotionally up to here. I really thought this guy might really know something.
And as the reward climbed to $250,000, Pat endured 2 more extortion attempts. And then, 1 year after Tiffany went missing, when Pat thought the news couldn't get much worse,
The 2 women found murdered Sunday afternoon were U of S students.
within 4 days, 5 students were murdered in Gainesville. Detectives had a serial killer on their hands. Did you think Tiffany could have been connected to that?
Oh, of course, the first day you wondered. Yes, I thought that maybe it was the same person.
Weeks later, an ex-con named Danny Rolling was arrested. He later confessed to the 5 Gainesville student murders, but he never confessed to killing Tiffany. Detectives dropped Rolling as a possible suspect when they learned he was in Shreveport, Louisiana, the evening Tiffany disappeared.
The biggest challenge always in a case like this is to keep everyone motivated.
When the leads dried up, private investigator Wayne Black tried to keep the momentum of the investigation going.
The case got cold, so you have to remind them it's still a kidnapping, it's obviously a homicide, and let's work it.
And Pat's team kept working it for 25 years. Was there ever a time that you wanted to give up?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie about that. I mean, there was times early on when I was just overwhelmed and didn't, in the frustration, not knowing what to do. And the good news was, even when I started to slow down, everybody else pushed me.
And no one pushed Pat more than this woman. In 2006, Sadie Darnell became the first woman elected sheriff in Alachua County. She was with her.
It was very jarring and very scary and very haunting to think that that could happen in our midst. And then this many years later, still having it unsolved.
Throughout the years, even though she was never actually assigned to the case, Sadie would mail and fax Pat words of encouragement.
September 15th, 1995. Patrick, I know this must be difficult for you to maintain a constant struggle for Tiffany's case.
I've always believed it can and will be solved. I have loyalty to you. The overall goal is for you to have Tiffany back, and at some time in the future, peace.
Call me anytime to vent, strategize, coordinate, capability, etc.
Etc. Always Sadie.
So when Sadie became sheriff, one of her main goals was to set up a cold case unit and find out what happened to Tiffany Sessions. In January 2013, Sheriff Darnell hired Detective Kevin Allen to do just that.
He's one of the best I've ever seen. In fact, I kept asking, where has he been all my career? This is the kind of guy that gets the cold case stuff. That's the kind of person that you need on this.
She told me very matter-of-factly, I want this case solved during my tenure here.
And Sheriff Darnell told Detective Allen that she wanted him to focus on one man, a convict by the name of Paul Rolls.
I've been in that case for a couple weeks. I never read the name, never heard the name. She said, get down and talk to him. Talk to him right away. Time is of the essence. I have an 18-year-old daughter. My daughter is the light of my life.
It's that personal to you.
Yes.
When Kevin Allen joined the Alachua County Cold Case Unit early in 2013, he knew working on the Tiffany Sessions case would be difficult for him.
Just being a parent and just the thought of something happening to your child. I have a picture of Tiffany Sessions I keep at my desk. I go to bed thinking about the case and I wake up thinking about that case.
we look at all the cold cases. We can't forget the past, and we can't just let it go.
Sheriff Sadie Darnell made the Tiffany Sessions case a priority.
We need to lift up every rock, peel back every layer.
She started by giving Detective Allen that lead to look into convicted murderer Paul Bowles.
What I found was that Paul Rolls was a psychopath, a serial killer. He had sadistic tendencies, sadistic fantasies.
And Detective Allen would soon learn that Paul Rolls had a long and violent past that lasted over 20 years. In 1972, he killed a newly married 23-year-old architecture student.
Linda Fido was a neighbor of his. They lived in an apartment complex in North Miami. Paul was a stalker. I mean, he would plan and watch his prey. He saw her through the peephole in his door to his apartment, and that's how he watched her.
When Linda Fido went to do her laundry, Paul Rolls snuck into her apartment, and when she returned, he tried to rape her. She fought back, and he strangled her.
This was a nude young girl in the bathtub.
Detective Marshall Frank, now retired, rushed to the crime scene.
One of the things that we found that was different on this crime scene than other crime scenes was a couple of Band-Aids.
Detectives were able to get toe prints off those Band-Aids. Then, a day after the murder, when they knocked on neighbor Paul Rolls' door, they immediately noticed Band-Aids on his toes.
So they went and took a toe print from him, compared it against the print that they had at the scene. They had their guy.
After his arrest, Detective Frank was shocked when Rolls quickly confessed.
There was no voices raised. There was no hate or anger. Just kind of like matter-of-factly going over something that just happened.
Detective Frank says Rolls told him he had sexual urges that he couldn't control.
I just asked him, how long have you had these kinds of feelings? And he said, for a while now. My thought process was, this man has a severe problem.
Detective Frank believes Paul Rolls was the most dangerous type of killer.
He met him at that time. He met a nice guy anybody would trust. He'd have him over for dinner. He'd never know. He'd never know.
Rolls was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Linda Fido. But in 1985, Rolls' life sentence was abruptly cut short when he was suddenly released and out on parole.
I thought, oh my God, that's not good.
That was the deal back then. Through was an overcrowding and lots of crime in the state of Florida. The average sentence for life in prison was 15 years.
Rolls only had to serve 13 years of his life sentence.
This is the kind of guy that should not be released from prison. I mean, he committed a heinous crime without any guilt at all.
In 1988, Rolls settled in Gainesville, where he worked as a pizza delivery man. He also had another job putting up scaffolding on that apartment complex Hunter's Run, located right on Tiffany's walking route.
He always stayed under the radar. When I interviewed his boss at Pizza Hut, he said it was as if Paul didn't want to be seen. He just maintained an extremely low profile, as many serial killers do.
In 1989, just 1 year after
Somebody just totally disappeared off the face of this earth with no evidence.
And it turns out Rolls did not show up for his pizza delivery job on the day Tiffany vanished. And then in 1992, just 3 years after Tiffany went missing, Beth Foster, that other college student, was found murdered just 1 mile from where Tiffany went walking.
Every time something happened up here in Gainesville, I was concerned.
Tiffany's mom, Hillary, immediately thought that the two cases could be related. You thought back then, back in 92, that this could be a serial killer.
Absolutely.
The same guy who murdered Elizabeth Foster could have taken Tiffany.
Yeah, and I've said that all this time, but nobody wanted to listen to me.
Private investigator Wayne Black says at the time, police couldn't link Rolls to either crime.
Remember, we didn't have the forensics that we have today. We were really in the dark ages.
And even though Rolls, by then 43, was an ex-con living in the area, police never questioned him. Just 2 months after Beth Foster's murder, he quietly left town.
Paul Rolls had lived in Gainesville for about 4 years. I think the heat was on basically at that point, so he got out of town.
And in 1994, Rolls struck again, this time in Jacksonville, when he raped and attempted to kill a 15-year-old girl. She was able to escape and identified Rolls as her attacker. Rolls was convicted, and this time he was sent to prison for good.
He was confronted soon after the crime and gave a full confession.
To that crime?
Yes.
To the young girl?
Yes.
But what about to the other crimes? Elizabeth Foster, Tiffany Sessions.
He wasn't interviewed about either of those cases in a timely fashion. The dots had not been connected.
Over the next few years, as DNA technology advanced, detectives submitted Rolls' DNA to the FBI database to see if he could have possibly killed others. And although it took 18 years, finally, in 2012, there was a match to Elizabeth Foster. How big of a development was that, linking Elizabeth Foster's death to Paul Rolls? It was huge. Years go on, decades go on, and nothing's happening, no new information, so it was energizing, it was wonderful. Sheriff Darnell knew that if Paul Rolls, who was now 64, had killed Foster, he could also have killed Tiffany Sessions. She was a young white female. They lived in the same quadrant of our county. Paul Rolls didn't show up for work the day that she went missing. Rolls, hoping he would cave and confess to Tiffany's abduction. But when the detective went to question him in December of 2013, Rolls was in a coma and dying of lung cancer. Did you hope that maybe he'd wake up?
Oh, sure. And with a last twinge of conscience, could, would, should say, I did it and this is where she is. But that didn't happen.
Paul Rolls died almost 2 weeks later. But Sheriff Darnell was not giving up. I sent an email to Kevin Allen saying, crap. Get down there and get his personal belongings as soon as possible.
Something in her gut told her to get a hold of Paul Rolls' personal property.
And what Paul Rolls left behind changed the entire investigation. I got chills when Kevin showed it to me. When Detective Allen went to retrieve serial killer Paul Rolls' personal belongings from jail, it was 24 years after Tiffany Sessions disappeared.
But it's just one box.
He didn't think he would find much.
And it's just a lot of letters and loose writings and stuff.
But then he came across Rolls' address book.
So I should copy this. This might be relevant. And there in the dead center of the book is a date, 2989.
I went, oh my gosh. Because that's the date that he disappeared. Then he saw what Rolls wrote next to the date.
Then number 2. I knew Linda Fida was his first victim. And chronologically, Tiffany Sessions would have been his second victim. I almost fell down when I saw it.
What was going through your head?
We have a possible link to the Tiffany Sessions disappearance from Paul Rolls' personal property.
It's a huge break.
Lucky. Really lucky.
And that's not all that was in the address book. Rolls had also written down the names of all of his other victims. Linda Fida, Elizabeth Foster, and the 15-year-old girl Rolls raped and attempted to kill in Jacksonville, a minor whose name we won't disclose.
Some serial killers like to keep a diary. Some keep artifacts. Some like to write down what they've done, a feeling of accomplishment. Look what I did. I've got 2, 3, 4.
I said, can I see it? This could be the smoking gun piece of evidence Sheriff Darnell has been looking for all these years. I was literally shaking, holding it, to see it and to see the depth of what that meant, possibility that this case could be solved. Once he discovered the address book, Detective Allen ordered up cadaver dogs to search the site where Rolls buried Elizabeth Foster.
They all alert about 20 feet from where Beth Foster was buried.
So what did that say to you?
There's remains here.
And it could be Tiffany.
Could be Tiffany Sessions. He obviously was in a comfort zone there. He left Beth Foster there for a reason, so he may have left multiple bodies there.
So on January 13th, 2014, just 1 month away from the 25th anniversary of Tiffany's disappearance, Pat Sessions and Detective Allen have gathered a team of people to help at the excavation.
25 years ago we started. I hope we're going to finish. I want to be there for the end of this if it is.
Some members of the team have been searching for Tiffany since she went missing.
I've probably been on over 20 searches for Tiffany.
Dr. Michael Warren is a world-renowned forensic anthropologist and expert in identifying human bones.
I've had Tiffany Sessions master file on my desk for 21 years.
He's been actively involved in the search for Tiffany since 1991.
She's just been one of the cases that I would really like to resolve.
And he knows it is not going to be an easy task.
It's very hard to go out and do an organized search over such a large area, so we've got to be pretty aggressive.
And if they find any bones, Dr. Warren will know if they are Tiffany's.
I've memorized her dental pattern and her dental chart. I'll know if it's her or not. To find her would just be a remarkable feeling.
Their plan to dig for 5 days.
I feel good about the operation. I feel good about the people on the ground. So we're all thumbs up, trying to stay positive.
After clearing the trees, they now begin the tedious job of sifting through every bit of dirt, looking for pieces of human bone. And in the afternoon, they do find a bone. But it's not human. It's a deer bone. Pat is disappointed, but he knows they have a lot more ground to dig.
We waited this long, worked this hard to get here. It's amazing. The commitment from everybody.
And if they don't find Tiffany here, Jason will never stop looking for his sister.
I might be done if I drop dead tomorrow. But he'll just keep on going. I hope he doesn't have to. Then we will. Yeah, we continue looking forever. As long as there's a way to follow, we're going to continue looking.
Which will be over.
This is definitely the one. You know why? The pieces are fitting. Everything is fitting in place. This is it. Is it hard to imagine that Tiffany might be in that spot?
I don't know what's worse, having absolutely no idea what happened to her, or having someone as bad as Paul Rolls having done it.
Believing serial killer Paul Rolls murdered his daughter makes it even harder for Pat Sessions to understand how, after receiving a life sentence in 1976, he was ever released from prison.
That makes me sick. Tiffany would probably be alive today if they hadn't let him kind of.
On day 3 of the excavation,
We're really moving some dirt. There isn't a chance we're missing anything.
Pat starts to wonder if Rolls may have buried Tiffany someplace else.
Am I losing optimism that we're going to find Tiffany this go-around? It's hard not to.
Later that day, Pat's fears come true when excavators finish digging in the areas where the cadaver dogs alerted and find nothing.
Certainly dogs are very good at finding the recently dead who are giving off these human-specific scents.
Forensic anthropologist Dr. Michael Warren says cadaver dogs sometimes can be unreliable when trying to solve cold cases.
Skeletons are a different thing. They just don't have any odor, associated with them.
And with no focus on where to dig, by the end of the week, the excavation comes to an end.
We have not found Tiffany Sessions.
It was a disappointing, yeah. Really disappointing. But we're never going to find out if we don't keep trying.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. This has been a long journey.
And then, just 3 weeks after the dig, Sheriff Darnell goes public about Paul Rolls.
He was in this community. He murdered in this community. He had made comments about this site being a dump site.
Darnell hopes that someone will know something that leads them to Tiffany's remains.
If you had any involvement with him, if you know of anyone who had involvement with him, bring it forward. For Pat and Hillary, there's a sense of finality to this moment. They think they have their man, even if they don't have their little girl. And above all, they're grateful. I want to thank the people. Detective Kevin Allen. This is the guy that's made everybody work. He's the one who gave Pat and Hillary the answers they've been longing for.
I think he solved the case. I think we found it to Tiffany. I believe that.
I think anyone who has children is touched by the case of Tiffany Sessions, especially myself. I know the sheriff too. It was an emotional day for all of us.
Tiffany's case is still officially open, but over the years, Pat and Hillary have tried to bring closure to other parents of missing children. Hillary has worked with advocates on child protection legislation, and Pat works directly with families.
You know, you try to find something, as corny as it sounds, try to make some meaning out of something, try and do something positive out of a terrible thing. And I think that's the best thing I could do. You know, if somebody calls me, I'm there.
My kid, Missy. I'm very comfortable here in your room. On bad days, like sometimes her birthday, I come and sleep here in the room because I just feel very close to her at that time.
I honestly do think that if Tiffany were here, she'd say, get over it. I don't think she'd want me to be spending my entire life, having already spent 25 years of this, trying to do something that isn't going to bring her back.
So if you imagine that she would tell you, knock it off, Dad, move on, why do you keep doing it?
For my own benefit. To try and to do what I think I should have done. I don't want to ever, if she walked in the door tomorrow, you know, I want to always be able to say,
every time I see her, she would be texting or Facebooking, and she was constantly on her phone.
I'm Nicole, and I've been nominated for the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
She happy-go-lucky kid. She smiled, she sang all the time. Tonight, the search intensifies for a missing teen from Blacksburg. Take a good look. This is Nicole Lovell. She's 13 and was last seen in the Lantern Ridge area of Blacksburg between midnight and 7 Wednesday morning. Her father posted this message to Facebook.
Nicole, honey, if you see this, if you're out there, you can come to me. I'm not mad at you. I'm worried about you.
Police are looking into whether an app popular with teens was used to lure the girl.
That night, I was going to knock on the wall and tell her to come in and sleep with me like she usually does. And I didn't do it.
So that yard that Act announced was located remains of 13-year-old Nicole Maslow.
one every single in around 8 9 place, nowhere to her. So where was Nicole Lovell's body? Nicole was, from what we understand, in the trunk of the car, and they moved her right over here, got close to the edge, and just.
A very preliminary determination of the cause of death is stabbing. It's no longer a situation where you worry about your child meeting a stranger in the park. You really need to worry about the stranger your child's meeting on the phone that you gave them for Christmas. This is the new crime of our time. These kids don't realize that the person that they're supposedly talking to that claim they're 15 or 16 years old actually may be the pedophile who's looking for someone to prey upon.
And the danger is everywhere. We're on our way to Spokane, Washington, where there was an online predator story you're not going to believe.
I was just going to write them a note telling them that I was running away and that I would make contact with them soon.
We realize that she's fooled, she's lured in.
So she was 15 and she was communicating with a 30-something-year-old. And he plans on getting her at 3 o'clock in the morning.
hour. It's just been a nightmare. I still hope that she would come around the corner when she gets off the bus, or she'll come out of her room.
The nightmare for Nicole Lovell's mother, Tammy Weeks, began on the morning of January 27th, 2016.
I pushed the door open, and the nightstand was up against the door.
Sometime in the middle of the night, the 13-year-old had climbed out of her bedroom window, taking along her phone and her favorite blue cartoon blanket.
Did you call her cell phone?
Yeah, a bunch of times.
And what would happen?
It goes straight to voicemail. I text message her. Everybody was calling her. Texted her.
Tammy called police and began scouring the area. Before long, a neighborhood mother gave her some chilling news.
Nicole had been playing with her daughters and said that Nicole said she was going out on a date.
Like millions of teens, Nicole spent a lot of her social time online. So Tammy feared she might have left to see someone she met on the internet.
You must be a bit panicked at this point.
Yeah.
The FBI has now joined regional and state law enforcement in the search. This afternoon, they canvassed from
Nicole's disappearance also sent shockwaves through her hometown, Blacksburg, Virginia. Scene of that infamous 2007 mass shooting at Virginia Tech.
And this community is known for stepping up, and we need them to do that at this time as we pray for the return of a beautiful young girl.
By midday, Blacksburg was stepping up again.
more than 1,200 searchers are on a mission to find the 13-year-old.
I know she wouldn't go nowhere for that many hours without her medicine.
Nicole was born with a damaged liver and needed a transplant before her first birthday. Now a teenager, she still needed her anti-rejection medication every day to survive. Her illness and surgical treatment had left Nicole with scars on her stomach and neck. Tammy says Nicole had emotional scars as well.
So she was being bullied?
Yeah, she did. She hated going to school. She would always make me write her a note for Jim because they would pick on her about her scar.
Nicole's social media posts revealed a sadly typical teenage story. So lonely, she had suicidal thoughts, longing for love, and convinced nobody cared for her. Tammy says Nicole not only had trouble fitting in, she also had a difficult relationship with her father, David Lovell. He did prison time on a drug charge, and he's had other problems with the law.
She wanted his attention. She wanted his love.
I have regrets. I wasn't there. I feel, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't I there for her more often?
He'd left Tammy before Nicole was born. The two were never married.
When you would go to work, was there anyone supervising her?
Yeah, my parents.
Your parents, did they live at the house?
Yes.
So she never went unsupervised?
No.
But Nicole was leading an unsupervised life online through the social media apps on her smartphone.
It's like a loaded gun. Good morning, Floyd County District Attorney Pamela Casey.
Alabama DA Pamela Casey is on a national crusade, warning people about the dangers of social media.
If you pick up your child's phone and you don't know the password, that's a problem. If you don't know.
She began speaking out long before Nicole Lovell disappeared in Virginia, and her online safety videos have been seen by millions across the country.
I can actually go live on Periscope to post updates to you guys. If I can do that live sitting in my office, then your child can do that live in their bedroom. Years ago, you had to worry about your kid getting snatched. Parents don't realize that essentially if your kid can get snatched, their life taken by somebody they need in their own bedroom.
By late on the day Nicole Lovell vanished, her parents' hope was fading with the winter light.
We love you, Nicole. We miss you. We want you home.
I didn't sleep at all that night. I waited.
But it would be 3 days before Nicole's parents had to face the horrifying news that her body had been found.
Your whole world just comes tumbling down. Everything.
Collie had a passion for pandas. Music, dancing,
Nicole touched many people throughout her short life.
Shock and sadness were everywhere, but investigators had gotten a big break, and it came from Nicole Lovell herself. She'd left behind virtual evidence of a real-life murder. Nicole's dad, David Lovell, says even before her body was found, investigators had found solid lead. Something she had handwritten on her bedroom wall.
She wrote all her usernames and passwords to all her accounts.
FBI computer forensics experts traced Nicole's account information and quickly established that she regularly used Kik, a popular chat app attractive to teens in part because they can communicate anonymously without their parents knowing.
When you had her phone, did you ever click on the Kik just to see what was inside?
No, I just made her delete it, uninstall it.
Do you believe she reinstalled it?
Yeah.
So the FBI puts in what they call an emergency disclosure request to Kik. They want to see Nicole's personal account, and they make a startling discovery. It turns out that in the last 2 days of her life, she'd been messaging with a person who had a chilling username, Dr. Tombstone. Using an IP address provided by Kik, investigators traced the Dr. Tombstone screen name to this young man, David Eisenhower, 18, a freshman engineering student at Virginia Tech.
I will personally not stop until I reach my peak performance.
David Eisenhower seemed the last person in the world capable of killing a 13-year-old girl. He'd been a high school track star. Former classmate Dorothy Callahan says his brains and charisma were as strong as his strides.
He was a very celebrated student. He always had straight A's, and he was sort of cocky, and he was like, yeah, I'm David Eisenhower. I was just on the local news. I'm a big deal.
3 days after Nicole went missing, Eisenhower was picked up by police at his dorm and taken in for questioning. His roommate, Jeremy Basdeo, walked in on the startling aftermath.
I went to my room and I saw the door open. I got turned around by the Virginia State Police and the FBI.
And what did they say?
They said, don't worry, it's not.
That night Nicole Lovell vanished was really odd.
They put on boots, but it wasn't raining that hard for boots. But, I just let it go. And then he came back at 2 in the morning.
And did you ever see a knife in the room?
Yes. He usually was on his desk.
Was it on his desk when the cops showed up?
No, they couldn't find it.
Eisenhower soon admitted to police he talked to Nicole outside her house that night. He was arrested and charged with abduction. Eisenhower's statements led them to another young woman, Natalie Keepers. She was brought in for questioning too.
Finding a job in this economy has gotten to be extremely important.
What did 19-year-old Natalie Keepers know about what happened to Nicole? Keepers, another Virginia Tech freshman, and another unlikely person of interest. Mark Jenkins used to be her boyfriend.
She wanted to study engineering and be like her father, who worked for NASA.
Investigators strongly suspected Natalie was involved. She, too, was arrested.
18-year-old Eisenhower, a Virginia Tech freshman engineering major, his friend Natalie Keepers.
With 2 people in custody, police made a grisly discovery. Nicole's nude body was located 90 miles away in North Carolina, says Surrey County Sheriff Graham Atkinson.
What kind of wounds were on her body?
She was stabbed. Her throat was cut. And then the thoughts turned to who were the animals that could have done something like this?
Sometimes it's usually the people we least expect.
DA Pamela Casey says Eisenhower and Keepers may represent a new kind of predator.
They could be your next door neighbor. They could stay behind their phone and hide behind their phone, and just like a child is doing.
Casey says criminals often use apps like Kik. Why? Because it's where kids hang out online. In fact, Kik, a Canadian company, claims that millions of American teens use their app every month.
He could be anybody.
This man should know. He says he used the internet to groom kids and spent 10 years in prison for molestation. Steve, as we'll call him, told us he now feels a new urge to sound the alarm about anonymous chat apps like Kik.
Kik is a predator's paradise. Pedophiles, do they go on Kik, pose as a 13, 14, 15-year-old in order to hopefully strike up a relationship with a child? Yes. That's quite common on there. Steve is now going to show us just how easy it is for an adult to use the Kik app to begin a conversation with a child. First thing I would do is,
we created and later deleted a Kik at children.
my message is, I'm sad and lonely.
So we're going to time this. You hit send.
Sent. I just got it.
Okay, what's the time?
44 seconds.
44 seconds. Another girl, apparently a teenager, responded less than 3 minutes later.
In 2 days max, I could have her sending me nude pictures. Once you make them happy, you got their heart. Once you got their heart, everything else follows.
3 months had passed since Nicole Lovell's murder. With David Eisenhower and Natalie Keeper still behind bars, investigators had discovered text messages that led them to this man's door, Bryce Dustin.
I almost felt like he was like a little brother.
It was on this gaming site that Bryce first chatted with Eisenhower. And though they never met in person, they began a 6-year-long internet friendship.
But David kept coming back to me for advice on everything.
What kind of problems would he ask you advice about?
That was a big one.
Dustin told us he remembers Eisenhower talking last winter about a problem he had with one girl in particular, a girl Dustin now believes was Nicole.
He told me that he found out she was underage and that she wanted to be with him and that she was going to expose him if he wasn't with her.
He says Eisenhower was worried about being outed in a relationship with an underage girl, so he offered some big brother kind of advice.
If she wants to be your girlfriend, let her, but don't be the greatest boyfriend, just don't text her, just ignore her, she'll go away.
This family was about to have one of their daughters go away as well in the car of an online predator in Spokane, Washington.
This guy wants to kidnap my daughter tonight. He's planning to kidnap my daughter tonight.
Our last moments is what flashes through my mind. That's my nightmare.
David Lovell wishes he had done better in protecting Nicole.
If it can happen to my family, it can happen to you. Flat out. Anybody.
It can happen to any family, including one here in Spokane, Washington, about 2,500 miles from Virginia. A 40-year-old man. And what's worse, the two are planning to run away that very night.
She's going to leave her iPad, hop in the car with a man she doesn't really even know.
It was June 7th, 2013, when Detective Elise Robertson of the Spokane Police Department's Special Victims Unit got the kind of call cops all over the country come to expect.
A father was saying that his daughter was having an internet relationship with a 30-year-old man, and he had just found out.
And then that's when everything broke loose.
Until that moment, Brandy Sarachan and her husband Brandon seemed to have the quintessential American family. She teaching at a local church, he studying for a PhD in psychology. They've been hands-on parents, raising their 2 sons, Joshua and Josiah, and 2 daughters, Ariel and Elizabeth. They shared a love of God, country, sports, and each other.
My parents were pretty strict.
Elizabeth, now over 18, says it wasn't always easy reconciling her upbringing with a growing lust for life.
I felt like my parents were holding me back from
what the average kid gets to experience.
And how much did your parents monitor your life?
I would say that they thought that they were monitoring me. They didn't understand that they actually weren't monitoring me. They probably had no clue about Kik and those dating sites.
But her parents did become suspicious when Elizabeth, then 15, suddenly started acting strangely.
She would be going to bed earlier than normal.
Elizabeth seemed distracted, less interested in family activities, in church, even in friends. Her parents took her smartphone away and asked to see her social media accounts. She refused.
And at that point, you're like, okay, yeah, something's really wrong here.
They were stunned to learn just how wrong. It all started with a phone call from Elizabeth's best friend's mother, a call that turned their world upside down.
Elizabeth is dating a 30-year-old, and he plans on coming down and getting her at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That very day?
Yeah, and we're like, what?
Elizabeth was angry and evasive, but her parents finally got her passwords and soon discovered the truth. She had been communicating with a stranger, a 30-year-old Seattle area man named Jason.
Jason Richards says, when I see you, baby, I'm grabbing you, pulling you close to me. And what's Elizabeth say? And then kiss. And Jason said, baby, I'm going to kiss you deeply.
She's evil. She's full. She's lured in.
Initially, Elizabeth told Jason she was 18, but later admitted her real age, 15. The Sirachins were stunned to learn that the pair had already met in person and been intimate. They were even discussing leaving the country. The two had used apps, including Facebook and Kik.
This is playing out in some ways like your own personal family horror film.
Yeah.
The horror continued as the Sirachins realized that within hours, Jason would be driving the 280 miles from Seattle to Spokane to pick up their daughter. They locked Elizabeth in a room with no phone or internet access and called police.
This guy wants to kidnap my daughter tonight. He's planning to kidnap my daughter tonight. Were your hands kind of tied?
What do you do at that moment? You have a 15-year-old girl as your only witness who's denying everything.
Detective Robertson says that without hard evidence of an actual crime, police had to stay on the sidelines.
So there's nothing they can do for you? There's absolutely nothing they can do for me.
And you hear that, you feel totally helpless, and it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do now?
What they did was hatch their own plan to turn the tables on the man who was about to lure their daughter away.
This is my daughter, and nobody's going to mess with her, and nobody's going to get her, and I'm going to do what it takes.
Jason had already messaged from the car.
I needed to communicate with him to get him to our house.
Gritting her teeth, Brandy went online, impersonating her own daughter.
For 7 hours, I sat there. And listened to him. Oh, baby, I can't wait to see you. I can't wait to get you in my arms. Lay in the same bed together, wake up in the morning. And 7 hours, I communicated back. Oh, baby, I love you too. I can't wait.
Being the pit of your stomach.
It made you sick.
Jason is getting ever closer to your house. Ever closer to your daughter. My wife was up there, and she was on the iPad. She's communicating with you. Yes. Posing as your daughter. Exactly, yes.
While Brandy kept the conversation with Jason going, in the alley behind the Sirachins' house, Brandon and his friends had set up a sting operation, like something out of an action movie.
I am over here with my car and my friend Phil. We're getting updates from my wife on the phone. My friend Dan, you're gonna trap. It's like a bear trap. It's gonna close. Yes.
Brandon's friend Phil brought his 12-gauge shotgun. He'd been trained in special forces and had no idea how Jason would react.
Are you ready to use this if I have to? Yes. He pulls right into this drive right here.
It was 3 a.m. in Spokane, Washington, but could just as easily been high noon.
He comes all the way in here to.
As Brendan Sutchin and his team laid in wait, headlights appeared at one end of the alley. A 30-year-old man's sexual road trip to take a 15-year-old girl from her family was about to come to a shocking end.
He pulls in. At this time, we go ahead and we call David down here, and David just books it. And I point in here. Jason pulls in right there.
Brendan's friend Phil quickly approached the vehicle, shotgun raised.
I said, "Driver, put your hand on the steering wheel. Do not move, or I will shoot you." A couple of times he moved his hands, and I said, "What part of do not move do you not understand?"
If Jason makes some sort of move, are you prepared to pull that trigger?
If he exited the car abruptly, I would have shot it.
They called the police, who arrived minutes later and arrested Jason. In his SUV, they found cell phones and a pair of hunting knives. They would later discover he also owned a handgun.
It wasn't over.
90 minutes later, Jason comes face to face with Spokane detective Elise Robertson.
Just tell me a little bit about your
I remember Royal Cut Coffee.
Detective Robertson learned Jason was actually Jason Richards, a 30-year-old divorced coffee distributor from the Seattle area. Like David Eisenhower and Natalie Keepers in the Lovell case, Jason Richards seemed nice and successful on the surface. Who is this guy?
Jason is the guy next door.
He tried to turn his crime into a love story.
Crush fell for her very quickly. He said, "I love you," pretty quickly, about a week and a half into really talking with each other.
At first, Richards insisted he had no idea Elizabeth was only 15 until a policeman told him at the time of his arrest.
He told me that she wasn't 18.
Okay.
I thought coming in, and she's 18.
He was lying. The whole time. He was lying. The whole time. Over and over. Lie.
To see if her instincts were right,
Did you give me any permission to look at your cat?
Detective rushes between him and Elizabeth.
And I start looking at it, and I realize, oh, he knew. He knew before he ever came over here she was 15.
Well, tell me the truth, honey.
Well, I looked right at him, and I said, so you know, tell me the truth.
I fell in love with her, and I didn't know what to do.
Well, she because she was 15 and still in school.
Eventually.
Right.
This is our first meeting spot.
Elizabeth told her parents she was going jogging, but instead came to this parking lot. When you actually saw him face to face, what did you think?
Holy crap. Like, I think it became a reality to me that it's not just somebody that I'm talking to over the internet.
Elizabeth says Jason took her to a hotel, got down on one knee, and proposed marriage. And then they got in bed. In the following weeks, he came to town again. On those visits, did you have sex with him each time?
Yeah, we did.
For you, Jason is what?
He's a sexual predator.
Completely just put my life.
My life was destroyed.
The events of that chaotic day still seem to haunt the Sirachans, too. This hits you right now like a punch across the face, right?
It's just absolutely unbelievable. This guy found out that she was a minor, and then after that, so he decided to sleep with her.
Richards pleaded guilty to child rape and communication with a minor for immoral purposes. His lawyer argued Richards has autism, which can be a mitigating factor for several crimes in Washington state. He got a light sentence, 3 years. When you learned that Jason was in jail,
It broke me.
inexperienced at love, Elizabeth says her online connection with Jason had been instant.
Everything progresses faster online because you're just more comfortable. You don't have to talk to that person in person.
These apps are apps that children are using to make them look.
DA Pamela Casey says far too many internet predators are turning to apps like it, and their alleged crimes are making headlines across the U.S. More crimes than Facebook and Instagram users combined. Did you fall in love with Jason?
Yeah, I did. I hate to say it, but part of me still loves him.
But Elizabeth didn't really have the whole full story about Jason Richards. In fact, she may not have been his one true love. On Jason's phone, Detective Robertson had discovered these photos of young women and men. What's your reaction to all that? About 10 minutes later, do you want to say anything?
I just feel so fooled. Like, for 3 years I've been defending him. And it's not right. It's not right.
Seeing some of Jason's graphic photo collection for herself drives home the point.
It's a lot of pictures, though, of a lot of different women. Oh, wait a minute. Honestly, if anything, it makes me feel better. It's going to be easier for me to move on.
Looking back, Brandy Syrochin says she wishes the judge had given Jason Richards as much as life in prison. But in Virginia, Nicole Lovell's mother says there is no punishment severe enough for the accused predators.
Qualifies someone to suffer.
And she says Eisenhower and Keepers aren't the only ones who have to answer for her daughter's murder. She blames Kick, too.
They need to shut Kit down. It's just disgusting.
Kick is now a billion-dollar company, and the CEO declined our request for an on-camera interview. It's ironic when the head of a social media company won't talk to us, so we're heading off to a technology conference in Brooklyn, New York, in hopes of catching up with the CEO of Kick. That's it right there. So excited. Evidence suggests Nicole Lovell was lured to her death over the Kick chat, one of the same apps Elizabeth Syrochin used to communicate with the man who almost lured her away.
Please welcome to stage 10 Livingston from Kick.
As Kick CEO left the stage, we... Yeah, on his smartphone. So Livingston, Peter and Sam, how are you? Good, how are you? CBS News. So I want to ask you a quick question. Sure. What personal responsibility do you have to make sure that children are safe who use the Kick app? Yeah, I think I have a huge responsibility. I'm sure you're familiar with Nicole Lovell, a 13-year-old girl in Virginia. What would you say to Nicole's parents? Like, when we heard of that case, like, I grew up with a brother with disabilities. Like many social media companies, Kick posts an online guide for parents, and in a statement told 48 Hours the company cooperates with law enforcement. Ted Livingston claims his app is as safe as the competition. I think it's no different than Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram. You have bad people going. As a parent, I disagree. I could check my child's Facebook account, Twitter account, I friend them. But with Kick, I can't. Yeah, I think that's no different than Instagram. You have a private mode, you can have private messaging, all that exists there. That's true, but Kick's design is attracting millions of teens, in part because many believe it's parent-proof, the best app to keep their social lives secret.
I'm sad and lonely.
Sadly, predators also can keep secrets on Kick. Kick tomorrow, if you messenger or shout down Kick tomorrow, there will be 10 in Greenburg. Back in Spokane, Elizabeth Syrochin is still struggling to make sense of what happened to her. Things with her parents are still tough. Are you sure that? Mostly because at 18, she met a new boyfriend at the gym. He was 35.
Would I like to see some things change? Of course.
We don't love to see that, but
You have to compromise. You can't just be your way or the highway.
yeah. Jason Richards got out of prison last month, and the case against him is closed. But in Blacksburg, Virginia, Nicole Lovell's murder case has yet to be resolved. We're heading down to the courthouse because David Eisenhower and Natalie Keepers, have a joint hearing together. No cameras were allowed inside as police presented new details of Nicole's murder. Details they say were provided by Natalie Keepers herself. Investigators testified Eisenhower covered Lovell's mouth and cut her throat. Keepers later helped Eisenhower load Lovell's body into his car, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. A detective testified that Keepers admitted to helping Eisenhower plan the murder and then dispose of Nicole's body. And that Keepers was excited to be part of something secretive. She said he was a sociopath and she was a sociopath training. It's all too much for Nicole's mom, Tammy Weeks, who comes to court but can't force herself to sit through the day.
I didn't know he had stripped her naked for bleach on her.
There is no evidence that Nicole was sexually assaulted. But David Eisenhower is formally charged with first-degree murder and abduction. Keepers as an accessory body. Eisenhower has reportedly told investigators, "I believe the truth can set me free."
Is there any doubt who was responsible for the death of your daughter?
I, without a doubt, believe that he did it.
Eisenhower's former internet buddy, Bryce Dustin, doesn't have much doubt either, especially after a final exchange he had with Eisenhower around the time Nicole disappeared.
He texted me and said, the original plans failed. And he said, do you know where I can hide a body?
At the time, Bryce thought Eisenhower was kidding. He, along with so many in this shell-shocked community, still want to know how two intelligent college kids, with their lives in front of them, could wind up involved in taking the life of a 13-year-old girl.
I wish you would have known it to me of her. I would trade places with her in a heartbeat. Because she deserved it.
Nicole's bedroom door down there at the end of the hall. Are you able to go into that room today? You can.
And nothing's the same.
Nicole Lovell's death is a dark reminder of how social media have profoundly changed society.
I hope everybody learns from this. Hold their kids tight because it can happen to you.
Today, our children have a host